I'm working here. Are we live? There we
Should be live. I don't know what
streaming Pokemon Sword and Shield.
What does the title say?
That's what it says. PBAL Season 5
draft recap. Okay. There's not two
draft
pools.
pool.
That's all wrong, but it's fine. So I guess I don't have the permission to ping out.
I don't have Why did they put two non-mods in charge of this?
I'm technically a mod.
Okay, then use your modly powers.
He didn't give me permission to post in the announcements channel. Oh, I do have permission. Ha! Add everyone. I don't have permission for add everyone. Why? I probably can't set that.
I don't know, but I'm gonna go ahead and start ripping off some plugs where I know I can, where you're not.
Okay, it says.
This is what?
Sorry, I'm trying to adjust this.
It's all good. I'm just sitting here in all the servers that I know that you're not in, that we share. And pluggy plug.
Cool. I'm just gonna ping people.
We'll do this one. Did I have something go wrong with Discord? Because all my hidden channels are now open again. I got PGP. I'll plug it there.
Okay.
Apparently Aaron is doing stream stuff right now because it's his pick in another league and he's just not picking. Again, I got a question. I'm not going to worry about it right now.
Absolute, welcome to the stream. And to everybody else who hasn't chatted, welcome as well. We are just getting things set up right now. But once we are ready to go, we will make sure to get this started as soon as possible. We don't want to waste any time. There are 16 coaches. Each person had 10 picks. So if you do the math out, that is 160 picks. If we take 1 minute per pick, we're looking at something like 4.5 hours, and we don't want to do that. So
trust me, I have done that. I've done 2 of those back to back. I do not like doing that.
So we will not be wasting time. We will be going. Some picks, of course, we'll take some time on. A lot of picks we're just going to talk briefly about and move forward. Google Slides are next level because it means I didn't have to work on it. Yeah, well, Aaron, you didn't let me at everyone, so now you're double pinging, jerk.
I was going to say I just got double pinged. That one.
Okay. So the way this is going to work, as you guys may have all seen already on the screen, there are 16 coaches. This is draft order. Really quick, I'm just going to go through who everyone is in this league. In draft order, you should read this from top left to bottom right, like you would read a book, not top to bottom, which I understand can be a little bit confusing. So, starting off with first pick was myself and the New York Empoleon, followed by Flame Horizon, coach of the Minnesota Lycanrocs. After that was Big Time Brownie with the Green Bay Yompers, followed by Absolute and the Seattle Dragonaires, then Sventhun, coach of the Uppsala Umbreons, the commissioner and founder of the league, Aaron, coach of the Rome Empoleons, the clearly inferior Empoleon team, Jetman99, coach of the Australian Arcanines, followed that, and the round of the top 8 was Hagbones, coach of the Vancouver Kyogres. And then in the second half of the draft, we have Bloody with the Charlotte Corviknights, followed by Playmaker, coach of his brand new rebranded Atlanta Victory Stars. After that is my co-host on this stream, Zach, coach of the Chicago Bearticks. Cyan Salamander then with the, I have no idea how to say this, and I apologize for getting it wrong, Soleil Samurats. After that is Devious Ditto with the Malam Arsenal. Then Choice Specs with the Orlando Magikarps. followed by Root, coach of the NJ Brobats, and finally, bringing up the wheel on the other side is Max Raptor, coach of the Tasmanian Toxicroaks. All right, that is the draft order, and like I said, we're going to get started in just a second, but Zach and I are just getting a couple things sorted out before we do.
Yep, I've got all the plugs done, so I'm ready to roll when you are.
All right, sweet. So it's plugged out in every server we know of, and everyone who's here, hope you enjoy. Just want to also give one more little disclaimer before we get started. After the draft, there was a period of time where coaches were allowed to change their teams up just a bit. Actually, not. But I say just a bit. Apparently, there were unlimited free transactions for 24 hours. So some coaches did take advantage of that. There were a number of trades made and transactions made that coaches will talk about in their own draft analyses, which should be coming out as soon as this draft recap stream ends. They are allowed to start posting. And anytime in the next week, check out their YouTube channels to see if they have posted their draft analysis. And if they have any transactions post-draft, those will be discussed there. This is exactly as the draft went. It is unfortunately difficult to discuss post-draft transactions because some things were drafted and teams weren't able to get what they wanted necessarily. So we're just going to not talk about that here. To recap the exact draft, but again, some coaches have already made transactions, so it is worth checking out those draft analyses if you want the most updated teams and teams that people will actually be playing in week 1.
I will say I made some of those transactions, and I will try not to spoil them.
And if we do spoil some because we know about them, I mean, it's not the end of the world. It can be worth talking about, but we're just telling you the slides you guys will see are all the actual draft, not any of those post-draft transactions. But are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, so like I said, we're going to try to go through each pick relatively quickly, but this first round, we might take a little bit of extra time. These are the first picks. They're kind of determining directions teams will go, so let's get into it. So I had the first overall draft pick, and I picked up Dragapult. To me, there isn't really another first pick in a draft at this time in draft format. I don't really know if I have a ton to say about it. It's like, that's really just all there is to say. If you have anything you want to add about Dragapult, feel free, but like...
I mean, it functions in so many different capacities. There's very few mons that are faster than it in the format, being, you know, Zeraora, trying to think what Ninjask, and there's one other mon that I know is faster.
Well, now Regieleki popped into format, which we'll talk about down the road. Because I've got some things to say about that one, but we'll talk about that later.
But I mean, spec sets, bandit, you can run bandit sets. Unfortunately, it doesn't have Poltergeist, but it still functions decently on the bandit set. Dragon Dance has become such a prevalent set.
But yeah, Dragon Darts is just such a dumb move.
Well, and yeah, the one thing that I learned the hard way is this thing gets Sucker Punch, so you can't even bring like a Scarfed Gangard or Retaliate because you just get Sucker Punched and die.
Sucker Punch, U-Turn, Will-O-Wisp if you want to run that set. It's got all sorts of things. There's no reason not to take it first overall. And speaking of first overall picks, in leagues past, our second pick in this draft specifically was the Landorus Therian, coach by Flame and the Minnesota Lycanrocs. It's back. It's back in force. It didn't lose really anything. Yeah, maybe its Calm Mind set got slightly weaker because of the lack of hidden power, but it has everything Landorus Therian ever had, and there's no reason. It's a great pick. It's always been a great pick.
I mean, I can't remember. Did it get Scorching Sands, or did they not give it that boost?
I don't recall checking. I didn't even... I like Landorus T. I've drafted it before, but I have moved on to try to draft other things, so I haven't looked at it in Gen 8 yet.
I don't care for the genies. I don't think they gave it Scorching Sands, but if they did, then that makes it just such a defensive nightmare because you can burn, and you've got the Intimidate, but with no HP Ice running around, it definitely gets a boost from that.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, in this meta, Ice types are better, and most people draft one, so it isn't as dangerous, but it's still very, very good. And next up was another... This is one of the more interesting first-round picks in my mind. This is Urshifu Rapid Strike. This is the water fighting variant of Urshifu. Going third overall to the Green Bay Yompers. Personally, I think that's a reach. But that said, I do think that this is a very good Mon, worth a round 1 or early round 2 pick, but maybe a little bit of a reach to take it 3rd overall when there are still so many threats on the board.
Yeah, 3, it's definitely an early pick. I would also like to argue that I personally think that Single Strike is superior to Rapid Strike, so seeing Single Strike still sitting there while Rapid Strike came off at 3, I don't know. I think they might have been backwards on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same that I felt. I won a championship with Single Strike, and week 1 it killed Rapid Strike, so, that's how I feel about it, but, here we are.
Yep.
And next up we have the pick of the Saddle Dragonaires, which is Tapu Lele, one of my personal favorite mons in format. Banned in a lot of Gen 7 format, but re-legalized with the knowledge that it does not actually get access to Expanding Force, thank goodness. But still really solid. It didn't, unlike most of the other fairies, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't pick up Mystical Fire. So...
I think it did.
Or did it? Okay, so it doesn't lose Hidden Power Fire that much if it did pick up Mystical Fire. But
I can't remember if it's this or Diancie, and I'm getting them mixed around.
I know Gardevoir picked it up, and I know Hatterene has it, so it would make sense to me if this picked it up, but because they're all the Psychic Fairies. But so a chat is saying it did not get Mystical Fire.
It did not. Yeah, I just checked it on Showdown.
Diancie got it. All the other Psychic Fairies got it, but this one did not. And so it is. Steals are a problem, but some steals are obviously weak to its other coverage moves, which it gets a plethora of, including Shadow Ball and Thunderbolt and Focus Blast. And so it's a great mon. Removing the access to priority while also being base 95 speed is just so helpful for it, and getting a basically free choice specs plus stab boost. So super solid. I mean, love this.
Scarf and specs are very common on this thing, and they just put in work. If they predict right, you just have no switching.
Well, that's the thing is, right, like, okay, Psychic type. What is your switching to a Psychic type? It's going to be either a Dark or a Steel most of the time. And Dark types get bodied by its Fairy coverage, and Steel types usually don't want to switch into whatever coverage it chooses for the Steel type in draft format. So still really good. Obviously, it's going to miss Hidden Power Fire a little bit for certain Steels, like things like Scizor that aren't actually weak to any of its moves, but still... I think Specs Thunderbolt to KO Scizor most likely, so probably not a bad option. And it can't get Bullet Punched, and it outspeeds. So next up is the Celesteela, picked up by the Uppsala Umbreons. One of those Psychic Steel types, we were talking about that does get beaten by Tapu Lele if Tapu Lele predicts correctly, but on the flip side, also can beat Lele if it gets in safely. This thing is back, and I'm sad about it. Personally... it didn't get Cosmic Power, thank goodness again. But it's just as dominant as it's ever been. Beast Boost is just as broken as it's ever been. And this is the first of the Ultra Beasts we're seeing fall. And honestly, it's one of the best mons in format. It was in Gen 7, and I don't see that changing in Gen 8 format, which is arguably the limitations that it has make this even better. You have anything you want to add to Celesteela, or do you just want to boycott this one?
I don't care for Steela. I got 6-0'd by the Autotomized set one time, and ever since then, it's just scarred me for life.
Yeah, welcome to Celesteela, but also welcome to mons that can 6-0 you out of nowhere, because the Commissioner Aaron picks up Dracovish with the next pick. Dracovish, I mean, teams have to be prepared for it, and... that over-centralization has led to it being considered debatably worth banning, but I don't think it's quite at that level. It does one thing. It just does it so well. But teams can be prepared for it. People know its tricks now. Although it does have access to one new trick. Its hidden ability getting released allows it to have Sand Rush now. But, again, I think if it's Sand Rush, it's not Strong Jaw, and it loses a little bit of power on its Vicious Rend. So... it's 6 to 1, half dozen the other. It's a great mon. There's no doubt about it. It's a round 1 pick. There's no doubt about it, especially in Galar decks. In Nat decks, it's a little bit different, but in Galar decks, it's definitely a round 1 pick. But I think it's a little bit one note for me. You still there, Zach, or did I lose you? Okay, well, Zach is muted for a moment, so we're just going to move on to the next pick right now, which is the Tapu Koko coach, the Australian Arcanines Jetman, picking up Tapu Koko this early in the draft. A lot of people were talking down about Koko, saying the fact that it didn't get access to the moves we thought it was going to get really sets it back and really hampers its ability to succeed in any sort of non-support role at this point. I think that's overstating it a little bit. Obviously, it's going to primarily be something that gives you access to electric terrain and U-turn and defog and all of the things that people are talking about. But the sets that were there before, minus Hidden Power, are still there now, and I think it's still a very, very good mon. Base 130 speed on an electric type that just spams Thunderbolt is super good if your team is not specifically prepped for it. And yes, ground types do wall this more, but it still has access to Grass Knot. It still has a really good coverage set, and if you do have a specially defensive ground type, it still could run the physical set and be really successful. So I think it's still a good mon in draft. I think round 1 is a reasonable place. I don't think it's the definitive pick 1 pick anymore, but I do think it is a really solid mon. Next up, we do have the Latios, as the Vancouver Kyogres pick up a beast in Gen 8. And I can't even necessarily tell you what made it more of a beast than it used to be, but it feels better than it's ever felt before.
It just got better coverage.
Yeah, which is crazy because it lost Hidden Power, but...
And it lost Reflect type, but it's still, you know, it gets Stored Power, it got Mystic Fire.
And Latios being the one that gets Dragon Dance. Although Latios, I think, picked up Dragon Dance this gen, but
yeah, it did.
Latios always being the Dragon Dancer, has a better attack stat, and pretty solid coverage on the physical side as well. One of the best, if not the best, defogger in the game for that role, in terms of having base 110 speed, not being weak to it. And just a really, really good mon, very versatile, and feels, you know, better than it felt in Gen 7.
Yeah, I think it picked up Aura Sphere as well. That was another key that it picked up, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I think Dragon Psychic is a phenomenal typing, and there aren't a whole lot of them, so if you want one, you got to get it early. All right, and next up is the first mon that we have never seen before in draft format. Bloody and the Charlotte Corviknights picking up Galarian Zapdos, our fighting flying friend. Defiant is ridiculous on this thing. It has agility. It is a fantastic typing with no quad weaknesses. Decent bulk. Really solid speed. Obviously same as regular Zapdos. Hilariously gets walled by regular Zapdos. But still really solid mon, all things considered, and spoilers for future, I faced this thing week 1, and prepping for it has been an absolute nightmare, so.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is it's anti-sticky web, it's anti-intimidate lead. It's a nightmare. You give this thing a Defiant boost, and with its signature move, dropping defense, I believe it's 20% defense drop rate, this thing can get out of hand very, very quickly.
Oh, yeah. And stab Brave Bird on the back end of that too. It's not like it, you know, oh, I'll just go into my like fighting resist. It's like, okay, well, I'll just spam Brave Bird and kill you. Or U-turn, which is a really solid move for this to have as well. Really good speed tier. I think this is going to become a staple of round 1 in draft format in Galar decks in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely become the premier fighting flying type. Halucha who?
And next up, we have the Atlanta Victory Stars picking up the Garchomp round 1. Now, Garchomp is a mon. Again, a part of this draft stream will also be us just talking about what mons have done it before and what we think they'll do now, especially ones released in the DLC that we haven't seen in Gen 8 yet. Garchomp picking up Scale Shot is insane for it. It is so much better than it's ever been just because of that one move alone.
This hurt. I really wanted Garchomp. I've been trying to get Garchomp for over a year now, especially with it coming back in Gen 8. I mean, it's phenomenal. You'd think that lowering your defense off Scale Shot for, you know, Ice Shard would be a problem, you just run White Herb, first off. Yeah. I don't want to hear about White Herb Garchomp sets. I've gotten enough flames for that, but this thing's just such a massive tank. You know, its dual stabs are very hard to switch into. After a boost, it's almost impossible to switch into. It has some coverage that people seem to forget, such as Fire Blast and Surf. I don't know why you'd use Surf, but...
I mean, and it has it on the physical side if you want it on physical too, because it's got Aqua Tail and Fire Fang as well. A little bit weaker Fire Fang, but
that's true.
Still an option. And Thunder Fang, and it picked up a couple things this gen, but it's got X-Scissor. It's got really solid coverage, all things considered. And now that it can get the speed boost, the thing that it was always lacking before. Yeah, 102 is a great speed tier, but just imagine if it was 102 times 1.5. And you don't even need to run Scarf anymore because of how good Scale Shot is.
Yeah.
All right, so you have the next pick, so I will let you go in and talk about your own pick here.
Yeah, so low-key spoilers, I wasn't actually the coach sitting here. Aaron came to me at this pick and said, hey, the coach dropped out. You want to take the pick? I was like, sure. I'll take over. I'm going to draft Garchomp's gone. Okay. So I was looking in Urshifu Single Strike here. With what was left on the board, this was probably the most broken thing left. This thing is just so hard to switch into. Yeah, you can bring bulky fairy types. I got Iron Head and Poison Jab. What are you going to do about that? Sub bulk up sets are problematic. You know, Choice Banded sets can be really problematic. With Sucker Punch for priority as well. Gets to pivot with U-turn. It doesn't have a massive move pool, but it still, for what it does, if your opponent doesn't have a designated Urshifu check, it can get the kills that it needs, or it can break early for a sweeper to come in and behind and clean.
Yeah, I like I said before, I won a championship with this recently, and it was either every week it was either the first mon I sent out or the last mon on the field, and sometimes both, because if your opponent preps for the breaker set and you have it come in as the late game sweeper when everything's chipped, they're just screwed. And if they prep for the sweeper set and you bring it in as a breaker early, they need to start going into their checks, and those things get worn down so much faster because you're just trying to break through, and then other mons have the ability to just end the game. It is so dangerous. Phenomenal mon.
Yeah, and with Wicked Blow, you can't even try to block it with Iron Defense. Your best bet is to Will-O-Wisp, and then you still crit through the Will-O-Wisp. So
yeah, Wicked Blow, whoever okayed that is wrong, objectively. Next up, speaking of snipes, I actually was helping Playmaker with his draft and told him that I thought Victini would last till he came back to round 2. It lasted literally one pick. So next up is Victini. Great mon, always has been, super fun to use, and I can't decide if I think Victini's gotten better or worse in Gen 8. I think the limited dex helps it quite significantly. I think its coverage is as good as ever. You know, the special set arguably is better than the physical set now, but that doesn't mean Banded V-Create is bad by any stretch of the imagination. It still has U-turn. But I really like just spamming Blue Flare, 30% burns flying around, and it's 94% accurate because of Victory Star. It's got Glaciate, which is great ice coverage for it to have because it lowers speed, and it just has such a good move pool. Hell, it has base 100 HP, and I've run Final Gambit Victini before. Like, it's a great mon all around. There is nothing bad about Victini, and with boots, it got so much better.
Yeah, and don't sleep on a Trick Room set either. I've seen Trick Room V-Create Victini put in a lot of work against a team.
Next up...
It just gets faster.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oops, sorry.
No, you're good.
I was just like, it just gets faster.
Yeah, no, it's great mon. Next up is arguably one of the more interesting picks of round 1. I love it, though. Dragonite is coming through here, finally back, and let's see how much work it can put in. I mean, people forget this adorable, cuddly, like, blob of a mon has base 130 attack and Dragon Dance and multi-scale and extreme speed. it's gonna come in and it's gonna do work every single game.
This hurt because when Garchomp went down, I was like, oh, I'll try Dragonite. 3 picks later.
Man, this is the story of Snipes.
Yeah, it is so, and with heavy duty boots now, you don't have to worry so much about Rock's chip breaking your multi-scale as you come in. So it definitely has gotten better in Gen 8.
Yeah, and let's not forget it has Roost. It has access to like some pretty good support moves as well. So really well-rounded Pokemon. You know, been around obviously since Gen 1, but worth drafting here. I think the one thing that holds it back slightly from being like the premier pick is the speed tier. Base 80 just isn't what it used to be, but it's still pretty solid, and if you can work around the base 80, especially in draft format, you'll be okay with it. So next up we have the fastest mon of the first round going here. Zeraora getting picked up. I would have loved if this thing made it back to me, but since I picked first, I was never going to see
same.
it. I was never going to see this thing at the end of round 2, but it is such a fun mon to use. I haven't drafted it all that much personally, but the coverage is stupid. It's good on the physical side, good on the special side. Phenomenal Life Orb set. Rarely is forced to run a plus speed nature, which means that it can usually run either plus attack or special attack, which allows it to be even better as a mixed attacker. Knockoff is just great for it to have because as a worst case, you figure out what their check is and you get rid of its item. I mean, there's nothing bad to say about Zeraora. It is such a good mon in format.
I'm so sad because this is my child. Anybody that has seen me play and use Zeraora knows that I can go off on a killing spree with this thing. Highlight being 17-6 in one season. You're right. It has the move pool to do whatever it wants. It can run physical. It can run special. It can run mixed. There are sub bulk up sets that can put in work. Sub calm mind sets. I have seen this thing used defensively as sub toxic protect plasma fist. That is true scum, but I appreciate the meme. It gets play rough. Dragon types. How many of them are thinking of play rough coming off this thing? It gets close combat. Aura sphere. It has the move pool to do anything and everything, and the one thing that seems to really trip people that they don't think about, don't sleep on this thing being choice scarfed, because as long as there's not a ground type coming at you, choice scarfed on this thing negates every other choice scarfer besides, Regieleki and Ninjask, and I believe Regieleki is hardwalled by this thing.
Yeah, unless they're running like Explosion.
Plasma Fist would turn that into an...
Oh, true. Type. So yeah, it's like Ancient Power is basically like the only thing they could hit you with. Yeah. All right, and so next up, the penultimate pick of round 1. And again, we are taking a little bit more time on this round than we expect to take on the future round, just because it is the first round. Teams are really getting that like power, and there's a lot to talk about with these mons. But next up is Hydreigon, which is honestly such a fun mon. It's like every other mon we've talking about, like every round 1 pick, like every tier 1 mon, so versatile, so good, so strong. And it has Nasty Plot now, which is so good. Obviously, Hydreigon is one of those mons that we talked about with Season 5 draft. We've talked about it in other leagues because it's been in Gen 8 for the duration of it so far. So we know what it does in Gen 8 now. We know it's really good in Gen 8. But that doesn't make it bad, even with the DLC release, even with all these new dragons and new mons coming out. Hydreigon will still stand up with the rest of them and hold up very well.
Yeah, and don't sleep on a Dragon Dance set.
Absolutely.
It does have a physical move pool that can support that. So,
and it's base 105 attack. Like that's not nothing.
Yeah, it's really really good.
Speaking of don't sleep on a Dragon Dance set, next and the final pick of round 1 is Latias. You might be able to sleep a little bit more on a Dragon Dance on this one. I am a little shocked this waited till 16th overall. I'm not going to lie. This is, like Latios, a very solid type, very strong offensively, and inarguably a better defensive pick than Latios. Access to some of those amazing support moves like Healing Wish, and I forget, it has another move that Latios didn't get, but there's a couple of moves that Latios gets that are just so much better supportively than Latios, and it has a better bulk distribution of stats, which is super nice for it.
Yep, and with it also picking up stored power, and I believe it kept either got or kept Aura Sphere as well. There's not a lot that can really check into this thing either if it starts going for Calm Minds. Calm Mind Recover, or Calm Mind Roost, Stored Power, Aura Sphere. Really the only thing that's going to come in is a very bulky Ghost type or a very bulky Dragon type that can take the special hit.
Yeah, so here at the end of round 1, we will take a quick little recap of all the mons. We're not going to like rename all of them. You can see them on your screen now, but we will at the end of the round. I guess each of us will give our top pick of the round because I think that's a really interesting part of draft streams. So do you want to go first for that?
Sure. I think so. For me, I think Celesteela and Coco probably went a little early. I think Rapid Strike Urshifu at 3 was a little high, but otherwise, this is very solid. A lot of teams picking up their Dragon types, a lot of people getting their Steel and Fairy Cores going. I don't really see any major this mon shouldn't have been in round 1 picks at this point.
No, I think that's a really important point to make. I think it's like this is the main league of the PBAL, which is this season for the first time opening up a D League. So this is the top 16, and then those are the 16 looking to break into this eventually. And I think this looks like a group of people who are ready to come to play. I think if I had to pick a top pick of this round, it's not because it's better than the other mons. I think Zeraora getting picked up 14th is the best value of this round. That is absolutely insane. That is a mon that can go top 3 easily. And for it to sit till 14, I think, is just such good value at that pick.
Yeah, I have to say, you stole them on at 14.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hard to do, right? There's very few mons that you're like, man, at 14, I feel like I'm getting better value than what I can possibly get. So, all right. So we're going to jump into round 2 here. Of course, the Tasmanian Toxicroak did have the wheel, so he got 2 picks in a row. And his next pickup was one of his free picks. We haven't really talked about the format. I guess I'll just talk about it briefly here. It is 10 mon this season. Basically, we just took the regular 11 mon format and dropped the Mega / Gmax slot. So it's still tier 1, tier 2, 2 tier 3s, tier 4, tier 5, and 4 free picks, totaling a total of 400 points, where a tier 1 is 180, a tier 2 is 120, a tier 3 is 100, a tier 4 is 60, and a tier 5 is 40, excuse me. And that's just pretty standard. We've seen this in many leagues that are doing tiers, not points. So picking up Clefable, which was going into the free slot as the second tier 1 mon, it is Clefable.
Why did we let this happen?
Latios Clefable with the 20-minute timer. I mean, yes, this league allows for use of the LAN timer, but I still consider any Wi-Fi league. I'm like, draft as if you're playing with a 20-minute timer, please, because it just makes the game so much more fun. But Latios Clefable, phenomenal core. I mean, there's no two ways about it. There's no denying it. At picking up the back wheel, grabbing Clefable and Latios is ridiculous.
I mean, they have such great synergy between the two of them. They can both, Wish Pass. Latios obviously has to Healing Wish, but Clefable being able to teleport Wish Pass and still be, Magic Guard or Unaware because of the ability patch, making that legal. And their synergy is just fun. Steel types want to come in and try to take out Clefable. Latios can fire off Aura Spheres to break those down. Dragon types want to come in and click Draco Meteor versus Latios, or Dark types want to come in. Clefable just moon blasts them out of there.
Yeah, and I'm sure we definitely won't see a strong, bulky fire type from this team. Absolutely not. Next up is the Slowbro pick to pair with the Hydreigon here. Slowbro in tier 2. I think that's a reasonable spot for it, but more bulk going early here in round 2. I think it's an interesting mon. It's like the start of the next part of his draft, right? You see that Hydreigon and Slowbro, and you're like, all right, I'm curious where you're going, but you haven't gotten there yet. But I like the pick here. I think it pairs really well with Hydreigon. It covers a lot of the weaknesses.
They generally cover each other very well. Slowbro being super thick, being able to regen off most of its damage, and
Also access to teleport now.
Yep, so it can slow pivot out. Hydreigon also being able to pivot with U-turn, allowing for momentum to pretty much stay on this team's side. And, Slowbro being a Gen 1 Mon has fantastic move pool coverage because everything in Gen 1 seemed to get a fire move, an ice move, and Thunderbolt.
Because those are the only moves in the game.
That is true.
All right, so next up is Tapu Bulu getting picked up here alongside Zeraora. Obviously, not picking up the Electric Terrain because Coco was taken round 1. I think Electric Terrain and Zeraora would be ridiculous, but also double Electric type. So now he's saying, I have a ground weakness and nothing else. Let me just remove EQ as a problem. Zeraora can go absolutely ham. And Bulu, yeah, it didn't pick up the coverage we thought it was going to pick up to make it the absolute beast it could have been. But it was good in last gen draft league, and I think it'll be good again here. It is a solid Mon with just a ridiculously powerful Woodhammer, and it doesn't really need anything else.
See, I'm going to disagree with you here. I think Rillaboom would have been a much better pick here. I personally think Bulu is the worst of the 4 Tapus, but I have been flamed for that too many times. So
I've been saying that. I've been saying that since last gen, so... Even when Finny started getting dropped to tier 2, I still thought Bulu was the objectively worst Tapu. But I also said Togedemaru is the best Tapu, and I stand by that, so we're here now. But I agree. I think Rillaboom is a very valuable pick and really solid Mon. I think was overlooked here a little bit potentially, maybe to try out Bulu in Gen 8. But if he wanted this to be his Fairy type and get those resistances that Fairy brings, perhaps that was his plan here.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is the next of the DLC Mons. It is Galarian Articuno paired with the Dragonite. How do you feel about the double flying type to start the draft?
Rhyperior, Lycanroc, and several other rock types would like to know this team's location.
Yeah, and ice types as well. I think it's tough because giving your opponent an extra incentive to bring ice moves against your Dragonite isn't ideal. That said, I think trying out Galarian Articuno, I don't think he's going to be disappointed with it. I just worry that some of these overlapping weaknesses that are already starting, rocks and ice moves especially, are going to be, chomping at the bit right now. So we're going to see how he manages this and how he changes his plan around to accommodate for the extra weakness here. But I've run double flying before and it's been fine. It's just tough when it is your top 2 Mons that you pick because those are the Mons you expect to bring every single week. It's one thing when you run like a tier 1 and a tier 5 flying type, or the tier 5 flying type, something your opponent barely accounts for. These are like first 2 draft picks. So it is tough. I think this is a really good Mon. I think its move, whatever it's called, is just stupid.
Freezing Glare, yeah.
Psychic is already such a powerful type. Giving it a chance to freeze is just ridiculous. But I worry about the double flying here.
Yeah, I mean, it is nice if he's running like Dragon Dance Dragonite. It is an anti-intimidator because of competitive, so...
That's true. All right, and next up, we actually, within the first 20 picks or so, have gotten through all 4 Tapus. This feels like Gen 7. What's going on? Finny comes up here. Finny Victini, not an uncommon pairing. Nothing that hasn't been seen before in Gen 7. It's tried. It's true. It works. We'll see a grass type with this, and we'll get that Fire Water Grass core all underway. I don't know how much Victini specifically appreciates Misty Terrain, but it certainly doesn't mind it. There are definitely statuses Victini would appreciate not having, so it's not a bad thing. It doesn't hurt Victini in any way, so I think overall just a reasonable pick.
Well, I mean, it can defog its terrain away now, this gen, so it doesn't necessarily, screw him out if he gets a grounded dragon type here later in the draft either. He can very easily just defog with Finny, clear the terrain and whatever hazards, and bring in his dragon type.
Oh, that's true. I actually didn't think about that, but the fact that it has defog means it could be a valid Scald user now, all of a sudden. Because you bring it in, you defog, you start scalding, you don't have to worry about waiting 5 turns to get burned.
Yep, and it did get, for the Calm Mindsets, it did get Draining Kiss, so...
Yeah, and it does have access to some amount of recovery now.
Yep.
Which is one thing Victini, or not Victini, excuse me, Tapu Fini always wanted. But it is your pick next, so let's get into it.
Flinch Hacks. And I know, so I was going to actually pick Finny, and what ended up happening was the Finny pick started a chain of snipes because I sniped Aaron on Togekiss. I've used Togekiss one other time. I love using it as a flinch haxer. I know that's really scum tactic, but if you can't beat them, join them. Scarf Set's very viable. Heavy Duty Boots makes this a decent defogger. Has the move coverage to deal with steel types trying to switch in because it's got Fire Blast. The one thing that I don't like, and it just is a personal thing for me, is that I never can find room for a fairy type coverage. So usually this forces me into double fairies, but putting T-Waves on a lot of opposing Mons really helps Urshifu because I can run the Banded Urshifu over a Scarfed Urshifu potentially.
Yeah, I agree. Togekiss is really solid here, and just gives Urshifu a lot of freedom. And while we did ban all forms of passing anything, it does get Baton Pass, so it has access to momentum in that way to bait something in and get out. But you can't even in this league, and I have very strong opinions about this, but I'll keep them out of this. You cannot click Wish and then click Baton Pass while the Wish is up. Don't know why.
That's true. You can't. I forgot we can't Wish Port either, so Clef can't Wish Port.
Can't Wish Port? Did he say that?
I would assume if teleport's considered under Baton Pass clause.
No, it was very specifically Baton Pass. We had this whole discussion. You can click, you can click Wish and then U-turn, or teleport, but you can't click Wish and then Baton Pass.
Why?
Yeah. So anyway, moving on to the next pick, because that is a discussion we have had many times and are not going to resolve here in the draft stream, is the Sylveon picked up by Playmaker. So welcome to Fairies. Garchomp Sylveon, again, another Gen 7 core I've seen before and seen work. Garchomp would love Heal Bell for those times where it gets burned. It would love access to Wish, and here it all is in one package, and something that can take the hits aimed at Garchomp, generally like Ice Beams, aimed at Garchomp. This thing has special defense for forever. So Sylveon, amazing to pair with Garchomp here.
Yeah, and I mean, Garchomp will clear those steel types out in a hot minute, you know, just drops an Earthquake.
Yeah, so I think this is a really solid pair. I think it's been tried and true and works really well. There's almost nothing like new to talk about. It's just good. Next up is the Jirachi getting paired with the Zapdos from before. Bloody picking up the other Flinch Hacks. So we've got Fairies, we got Flinch Hacks, all going in a row here. And get ready for this to start the next typing that is going to start going in this draft pretty rapidly. But Jirachi, I mean, I don't know. What is wrong with Jirachi? Like, it's
4 move slot syndrome. That's about all I can come up with.
And only sometimes. I mean, in a lot of matchups, you can be like, oh, I could have 4 move slot syndrome, or I could just run Thunderwave Ironhead and be done with it. Like, and Thunderwave giving Zapdos just that much more access to freedom in the same way you were talking about Togekiss, spreading the yellow magic and the other Pokemon on your team reaping the benefit of it. I think Jirachi does a similar thing here. Gives access to rocks as well. U-turn to get into the Zapdos. So this I would say Volt Turn, but I guess it's just turn core here already starting is pretty scary for Bloody, who, if we want to acknowledge, is also our reigning champion. So this is someone who knows how to use these Mons as well.
Yeah.
Next up is the Excadrill. Like I said, get ready for some of these, this new typing. So the Fairies went, and now we are moving on to the Steels. Latios Excadrill is a fantastic pairing. We have already seen the Dracovish go, but there are 2 phenomenal weather setters in format. So we'll have to see how that pans out, or I should specifically say sand. There are 3 sand setters. I'd argue there's 2 phenomenal ones. Because they've already taken 2 tier 1s, he won't be able to draft Tyranitar, so that's something we're going to have to watch as time goes along. Does he take Sand with the Excadrill? But just a fantastic Mon. Another piece of removal like Latios, arguably the best Rapid Spinner in the game, to pair with arguably the best Defogger in the game, which is crazy already. And I think this thing benefits from the Rapid Spin buff probably more than any other Mon in format, and is just a fantastically strong Mon in its own right.
Yeah, it definitely enjoys the Rapid Spin boost because it's sitting at that base 88 tier, which is right below, like, if this thing was just slightly faster back in Gen 7, it would have been a bigger problem than it already was.
Now it just clicks Rapid Spin, gets rid of all of the hazards you spent so much time putting up, and gets a free Choice Scarf. So next up, we have the Gothitelle pick here. Yes, Shadow Tag is legal in this draft. Koko Gothitelle. What I would assume here is the idea is that Gothitelle comes in, removes whatever's in Koko's way, and I believe it does get access to Energy Ball, so can remove a ground type pretty easily, and then Koko goes nuts. And trick Shadow Tag Gothitelle with a Choice Scarf to give it to your opponent, sets up 6 Calm Minds, and then tricks it back and takes it back, so now it's a +1 and 6 Calm Minds and goes for whatever move it wants. That's a set that can just win games if you're not prepared for it, or if you let the things that are supposed to handle it go down. So, personally, I love Gothitelle. I think every time I use it, it's a better Mon in theory than it actually performs. I think that's on me, not on the Mon, because I like Gothitelle a lot. I just somehow always underperform myself with it, so I'm curious to see how he's going to use it. But solid Mon all across the board.
And if Jet wants to, he can also just PP stall the crap out of something. So
we're not going to talk about that with the timer. So next up, we have the Corviknight going with the Dracovish here for Aaron, the Commissioner. I almost said Aaron Cybertron Zang. It's not that Aaron. But I said, you know what? Here we are. I said it. So Corviknight going up next is going to be paired with Dracovish. You can see Sand coming from a mile away. Just a matter of who he's going to pick up to pair with it. It's clearly getting started, and it's clearly going to be solid. I mean, Dracovish Corviknight is a really, really good core of Mons. Corviknight being able to take hits forever. Dracovish being surprisingly bulky as well. Really good for him to pick up a flying type that is not weak to freeze dry. I actually really respect that play here. Though I think he would prefer potentially if his steel type actually resisted it. I think this is a really good Mon for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what's one of the best checks to Dracovish besides Water Absorb Mons? Corviknight. So by taking that off the field, he takes it for other coach being able to bring a bulk up Corviknight to slow Dracovish down.
Absolutely. So next up, we have Heatran getting paired with Celesteela. So this time, we've got double steals, but they actually don't share any weaknesses. So an interesting choice, but honestly, if you're going to pick 2 steals, these 2 are pretty good to pair together. Heatran, it's been good since Gen 4, and it's just here doing Heatran things. Someday, it'll get Flame Body. Or not Flame Body, Flash Fire.
It does.
It does get Flash Fire now?
I'm pretty sure it does. With the ability patch, it would unlock its hidden ability, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, well, if it gets Flash Fire, it's just even that much better than it's always been. But gives him access to an actual rocker, gives him access to a really strong fire type, and also really good steel stab that Celesteela, it's just not the most offensive Mon usually. It can be, but it usually isn't. Heatran doesn't mind going in that direction.
I'm a little mad that there's 2 steel types here, because I still need my steel type.
Yeah, I have Pult, so I don't love seeing 2 steel types on the other side of the table. Next up, we have Salamence getting paired with the Tapu Lele. So really, really solid. Just 2 independently good Mons. There's not much more to say about it. They are both good. They are both capable of doing their own thing. And when you put them together, it just makes it even scarier to prepare for, because you have to prep for each of them doing whatever it is they need to do. And if you can get through one, how much damage did you sustain? Can you still withstand the onslaught from the next?
Yeah, and the other thing too, no ice shards against Salamence.
No, Ice Shard would work because it's not grounded. So the Psychic Terrain checks if the Pokemon that it's targeting is on the ground, not the Pokemon that's sending it out.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I mean, Salamence roosts, and then...
Yeah, true. If it roosts, then... I don't know how it's roosting before the Ice Shard, but yes, if it roosts, you can't use it. I stand by... this is a little bit of a tangent, but we're gonna go into it right now, because I say it at least once a draft stream, so that maybe someday, when we're a bigger channel and Nintendo is watching, they'll actually take this into account. Why doesn't roost last until you move again the next time? Destiny Bond works that way. Why doesn't roost? Like, you went down, you're taking a break. You should be down until you get back up to move again. Not at the end of the turn, but at your next action. In the same way that if you use Destiny Bond and then your opponent hits you on the next turn before you've acted again, they still die because it's still active. So the game knows how to check for that. Why isn't Roost also designed like that? Because you should stay down until you move again to get up and make your next action, allowing for grounded moves to hit you the next turn. Similarly, how Smackdown works, Destiny Bond works, things that allow for the next turn for you to stay down. I think they should all work the same way here.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. Unrelated, Salamence is a good mon. Moving on to the next pick. It is another Steel type here. We've got Aegislash to pair with the Urshifu Rapid Strike. Yeah, it lost 10 in each of its stats effectively. That doesn't matter. It's still ridiculous. And the mind games that you're forced to play when you're playing against an Aegislash always feels bad. And paired with Urshifu, which is just... This is a really good team for the priority aspect. Obviously, Lele is saying hello, but just having access to both Aqua Jet and Shadow Sneak on these two mons can really help pressure teams and chip when they are chipped down to finish them off if needed.
Well, and don't sleep on Special Aegislash, which has really started to come on since the beginning of Gen 8. Steel Beam Specs is something to be very afraid of.
Oh, absolutely. And if you don't want to like spam Steel Beam right away, just Flash Cannon. You know, like double steel coverage is usually not going to hurt this because of what it is capable of doing. It also got access to close combat, so watch out for even better banded sets. I know Sacred Sword, but that's a huge like upgrade in just straight damage output. So really good mon, all over the place. Next up is Rotom Heat. We are getting into the very end of round 2 here, and I think this is early, but I think it's the kind of mon that if you don't take it when you have the chance, you will regret it if it is the mon you're looking for your draft. And I think pairing it with Landorus Therian is really, really smart. Similarly to how you were talking earlier about taking your best check off the board, Rotom Heat can beat Lando T 1v1, so why don't I just not let anyone else have it and have it myself instead?
Yeah, it gives him a nice Volt Turn core as well, and a good start to his hazard control, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Boots does help Rotom a lot with hazard control.
But Boots is fantastic on Rotom Heat.
All right. And finally, the last pick of round 2 is myself, and I'm going to pick up the next Ultra Beast here in Nihiligo. This was a mon I've never even thought about trying before, I'll be honest. But in this particular spot, I figured it pairs really well with Pult. Really, really good special defense. Gives me access to either a special attack or a speed beast boost as needed. And good coverage. I mean, good spiker, not spikes, but toxic spikes and stealth rock setter. I just think it does the job I want really well, and I couldn't think of another mon that did it. Really starting off my my speed game too. I'm trying to be the fastest team under the sun.
I wish you the best of luck with Nihilego, but I have been disappointed with it in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I've never drafted it, so I wanted to give it a shot. I'm generally the kind of player who will draft a mon I've never seen, just because, or draft a mon I've never drafted before, because why not? And as the chat is saying, Meteor Beam is a move that it really appreciated picking up.
Yeah, Power Herb Meteor Beam.
Yep. So, our round 2 recap. Again, we are not going to go through each and every mon once again, but here it is. It is the every other round. This is just going to be listed in like quote unquote reverse order because it's just listed the same way that we started the draft. So Bottom right is now the first pick of the round, going up towards top left. So just a heads up on that. On the even rounds, that's going to be the case. But all right, let's go over our favorite picks of round 2.
I mean, I'm really partial to the Corviknight going there. I think that just was fantastic synergy. Jirachi was another highlight for this team, obviously for this round, and Clefable again. Just paired with Latios is just going to be so annoying. Nice theme here. You see round 1, most people going after their dragon types, and round 2, it's the fairy and the steels that are getting paired together.
Yep. So a lot of cores are starting to get picked up here, and you'll actually notice as my draft goes along, especially since I end up having like the wheel on the other side, that I kind of can see the theme going on of the round and draft in a very different order than other people because they are taking them now and they'll already have them later. So my draft's going to be a little bit wonky, but if I had to pick a Mon here that I just think is like the most objectively strong Mon of this particular set of Mons, I think it's going to be Aegislash. It's another one of those Mons, like, how did you get it this late? It's a really, really solid Mon here. So, but Jirachi, obviously, incredibly good Mon in its own right, and Clefable as well. So, we're going to jump into round 3 now, and we're going to lead it off myself, picking up the Rillaboom. This is why I was okay with the Tapu Bulu pick earlier, because I was like, I want Rillaboom. I want it to pair with Nihilego, not get rid of the ground weakness, but at least help mitigate that a little bit, and just manage the speed tiers on my team a little bit. And Rillaboom gives me U-turn, which is fantastic. Gives me Grassy Glide, which is something that I think my team was really hoping for with some strong priority moves. Has knockoff, has such good moves, is such a good Mon. Honestly, I've never drafted it either, but I'm really excited to use it this season.
I think we might have froze because I've refreshed Twitch and we're not moving off of Nihilego.
Oh, sorry. That's my fault. We should be on Rillaboom now. But, well, I'll give people a real quick...
There we go. It's up on the screen now.
I'll give people a real quick glance at the round recap one more time, just because I don't think it showed up on stream. So here we go, what we were talking about a minute ago. So apologies for the technical difficulties, but we're gonna move on to the Rillaboom pick. And I feel like I've talked about it. We talked about it earlier with the Bulu versus Rillaboom debate.
Yeah, you got the better grass setter. You got the better grass and terrain setter. So
yeah, I'll take it. Next up is the Tentacruel pick here, which... give me your thoughts on this one before I talk about mine.
Way too early. Way too early, in my opinion. I mean, it is a fantastic hazard control Mon, giving you Toxic Spikes and Rapid Spin, obviously giving it a boost, plus heavy-duty boots, but I really feel like this thing could have lasted, round 5, maybe round 6.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tentacruel's a good Mon. Don't get me wrong. I think it's actually a really solid Mon, but I do think this was a bit of a reach at this point. I think the Rotom Heat was also a reach. So, I say the Rotom Heat was a reach. I wasn't looking at Rotom Heat, so it definitely could have waited till the next round. But he obviously didn't know that. But I think this could have also waited. I don't know what exactly he's looking at for the other Mons or the math he's doing to try to figure out how many round, like tier 1 picks are around that he would want for later. So maybe he's reaching to rounds 3, 4, 5 early to try to get some extra points when everyone's already spent them and just get those picks later on. I'm not 100% sure, but I agree with you.
Because,
this felt early.
He doesn't have a Fairy, Dragon, or Steel type yet, so with those getting rolled off, the first 2 rounds heavily damaging those pools, he might just be trying to get his Fire, Water, Grass core now while everyone else is not looking at it.
Yeah. And, me picking up Rillaboom, similar idea. It's like, get your grass now, get your waters now. But I just think if you wanted a premier water from tier 3, Tentacruel's solid, but I don't think it stands out as far as needing to be picked up this early.
Yeah. All
right, next up is the, speaking of water types that could be picked up this early, Pelipper pairing the Urshifu and Aegislash with Rain. I like that.
Bird.
I like that idea.
Trash bird.
But, I mean, Pelipper itself feels like a necessary evil in order to make Rain solid. Politoed's okay, but Pelipper's better.
No, dude, I will show you some replays after this draft stream where Politoed outclasses Pelipper 9 times out of 10, and I will take that to the grave.
I think access to Roost and U-Turn and Defog help Pelipper set itself apart from other weather setters. Other weather setters often, except for if you argue about Ninetales, and Powdon, have trouble recovering, have trouble pivoting. So I think Pelipper, if you're choosing it as a weather setter exclusively and maybe hazard removal, but not really an offensive mon, I think it does the job really well. I think Politoed can outclass Pelipper by being a little bit more self-sufficient.
Politoed gets rest, so rest, sleep, talk sets, but I'll talk about it if Politoed gets taken. I just don't. I don't typically like Pelipper. I don't think it's that great of a setter. It's super slow. It dies to. This team cannot take a Thunderbolt or a Thunder after Pelipper sets Rain. Thunder just rips this team apart. So I don't like this as his Rain setter. But that's just me personally.
Well, speaking of really good ground types to take on a Thunder, the next pick is Mamoswine, the best ground type in the game, in my opinion. Maybe outside of Garchomp now that that's back, but does a slightly different role. Pairing it with Lele is interesting. But again, I think this feels like that time that I drafted and I literally said, whatever the biggest threat left on the board is, I'm just going to take it. Like, I'm not going to worry about synergy. I'm not going to worry about how those mons work together. It's just the biggest threat left. I'm going to take it. And, hey, I made semifinals that season, so it works well to just have a team of absolute threats. I'm sure the synergies will start to reveal themselves. These just feel like 3 incredibly strong mons independently of one another, and I'm curious to see how he's going to pair them all together and make them work as greater than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, I mean, it does pair nicely with Mence because of the fact that Thick Fat, it can take those ice hits and sponge them for days for Mence. Yeah, Lele Mamo kind of a little bit rough there because of the Ice Shard, but still, this is fantastic for Absolute.
Yeah, and a great speed tier as well for this team, which was looking for a base 80 or so. So, again, speaking of ground types, next up is Zygarde 10%, and I think this is where that was an angry grunt.
This was a huge snipe on me. This hurt so bad because all the dragon types had come off the board at this point that I was looking at. This thing is fantastic speed tier. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you there.
Oh, you're good.
The fact that it doesn't get rocks. Okay, so what? Banded, Scarfed, Dragon Dance sets. This thing is viable across the board, and it puts in a lot of work. Ice types have to fear this team because of the dual steel types. It's just, I wish I had this dragon right now.
Yeah, no, I don't have much more to say about it, so I'll leave it there. Next up is the Raikou, now being picked up by the Rome Empoleons here. So I think it's a decent switch in to the electric type moves aimed at Dracovish and Corviknight. But it's not immune. It's not Zeraora. It's not even in this case Jolteon for that purpose. I think Scald, Aura Sphere, like electric coverage, this thing is a threat with Calm Mind. Scald just gave it so much freedom. Yeah, it lost Hidden Power Ice, but a lot of the ground types that would otherwise wall it certainly don't want to take a Scald burn. Like, absolutely not. So, I do think this is a really good mon. I think this team has to worry about electric at this time, but we're going to start saying that until teams pick up their ground type. So, but especially teams that have very few resistances.
Yeah. I don't really have much to say about Raikou because I think I've used it once, and that was a year and a half ago.
All right, so we'll move on to the next mon. We're going to start picking up the draft speed as well. as we get sort of down into the tier 3 stuff. So Araquanid is the next pick here. Webs with Coco, really good. Webs with Gothitelle, really good. Good special defense. Worry, again, like we mentioned about electric types. You'll notice electric types are really good in this format. And teams really worry about picking up a good one here. Mostly because he's giving them electric terrain and then doesn't have a resistance except for Coco, which is not really a resistance. So, again, gonna have to watch out for that, but really solid Mon. I like Arachnid a lot. Mirror Coat shenanigans are always a mind game you have to worry about with this thing because it has base a billion special defense.
And in my personal opinion, I think that this is the best web setter of the bunch. So
okay, that's a debate for another day.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's really solid,
like
but I think every web setter has its own niche, and they feel different. You use them for different things. So as an overall, it's hard to say, but I like Arachnid, certainly. Next up is the Primarina. We do see the Steel Dragon Fairy Core getting completed here with a phenomenal fairy type. I personally was unimpressed by Primarina when I first saw it in Gen 7. I used it one time in a league and fell in love with it. This thing is crazy. It is strangely bulky for what it does. It takes like one hit of anything, and it dishes out so much damage. It has crazy coverage, even without hidden power. It's got like Psychic randomly. It's got Energy Ball. It's got just phenomenal, weirdly phenomenal coverage. Its stabs are already crazy. And, you know, being able to go for a water type hyper voice to go through substitutes and stuff is just super nice. So I like this Mon. I think it's a great pick.
I'm glad that you see the value in Hyper Voice, Liquid Voice, because I got roasted a lot for that set. I love Primarina. This FDS core is disgustingly offensive. I mean, Primarina usually thought of as bulky, but Scarf and Spec sets are very difficult to switch into. I mean, I love this core. I think this is an amazing FDS core.
Yeah, no, this is the round 1 through 3 Fairy Dragon Steel core you want to see if you're the person taking that particular core. All right, next up we've got the Rotom Wash. Speaking of water type starting to go now. So we saw the fairies go, the dragons go round 1, the fairies and steels in round 2, and in round 3 it's the waters. Rotom Wash. It's just a good Mon, and it has been that way for so long, and it's just good. There's no denying it. There's no way to avoid that. It's just good. Like, that's just what it is. And I don't know. I feel like there's not even a lot to say about Rotom Wash. It just does its job every single game.
I mean, it appreciates the boots, but, I mean, all the Rotom forms do, and everyone knows what Wash does.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. There's nothing new to say about it. It does exactly what you think it does, and it's been doing for a generation, and has been doing well. Speaking of things that we need to talk about, though, Cinderace does not have Libero. I'm not even sure how to say that, but doesn't have it, so we don't have to worry about it. Still tier 1 in this league, I believe. Maybe it was tier 2. Maybe it was tier 2 now that I say that. But still a really good Mon. Base 119 speed's crazy. U-turn is crazy. High jump kick, sucker punch, pyro balls, nuts. You know, it's just got solid moves and a solid coverage option pool and great speed and strong attack.
Court change, heavy duty boots, and it was a tier 2.
Court change is dumb. That's it. Yeah, and I think this is the right time for this Mon to go here. Maybe even late for it. And you know, I just drafted this thing in another league that I was in, and ended up I took it round 2. It was as a tier 2 Mon, and I had tons of success with it. So can't deny how good it is. It literally was the thing that got the last kill to win me a championship. So Next up is the next Ultra Beast to go.
This is not the right pick. This is not the right pick. This is supposed to be Gudra.
This is Gudra?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is one of my free agent transactions that I made. This was supposed to be Gudra. I drafted Gudra round 3, so
Okay.
I guess I'll talk about Kartana then, since that's what's
That's
here.
what's here. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, this was made with grace period in mind?
bloody. If that was the case, then
Some
my
trades should have happened
second
and stuff.
round pick's wrong too, because
Yeah.
yeah, I traded Kiss away. So, anyways, Cortana. I needed a steel type. I needed a grass type. All the good steels and grasses were gone, so I was like, well, we'll make the points work and we'll take Cortana. I've used it one other time. It does get defog. Not gonna use it as a defogger, but it does get defog. I don't know. It's such a problem if you don't plan for it because scarf sets can run up on you, banded sets can run up on you. If you predict those sets wrong, and they bring a Swords Dance set with speed boost, you're still screwed. I mean, it does a lot of work. I'm looking forward to the Rain team with Kartana.
Yeah, Kartana. It's. I killed it with a Marowak using Flamethrower once, which was the most satisfying thing in my entire life.
It dies to a Charmander Ember. Like,
Anyway, it's really good on the physical side, though, and a very, very strong mon. I agree. It's if you don't prep for it, you lose. Next up, speaking of weather, Alolan Ninetales here for the Victini and the Tapu Fini is... I mean, Veil is great. Don't get me wrong. Defog from Fini does not remove Veil, so that's also solid. These are hard stabs to switch into. Double Fairy... One of them is not weak to steel anyway, so we were talking about how electric types are a problem. For this team, it's actually poison types, which is something you would never have expected to say as like Gen 5. To say poison types are offensively a problem was ludicrous, but here we are. But we'll see how he manages that. Veil just gives everything so much more power, and Victini behind Veil spamming V-Create sounds like a blast.
my only question here is, are we sure this isn't Dan drafting? This looks like an A draft.
Honestly, though. All right. Next up is the team that had originally double flying is now picking up the Whimsicott. So saying, let me pick up all the flying types and then...
I was going to say ice types still would like to know this team's location.
So and it doesn't resist rock either. So we'll see how, again, this shapes up. But Whimsicott, I like it. It's a good mon. Gives access to Tailwind, Defog, Leech Seed, Shenanigans. Prankster is just solid. And it's a fairy type with Prankster, which is convenient for it because dark types that are now immune to Prankster really don't want to switch into it anyway and risk just taking a huge Moonblast for no reason. So Leech Seed generally gets off and it has U-turn if needed. Has Memento, so overall, decent mod.
Yep, T-Wave or Stun Spore Shenanigans incoming as well.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Metagross being picked up here. Metagross paired with the Bulu and Zeraora. So again, I think this has been a problem since Gen 7. I've never drafted Grassy Terrain until literally earlier this round in my life. But I've seen this many, many times, this trap you fall into where you say, I have Grassy Terrain, so my ground weakness doesn't matter. And it does. And stacking ground weaknesses is a liability and is a risk that you have to consciously worry about as you're prepping your draft here. So I love Metagross as a pick. 2 ground weaknesses with Grassy Terrain. He's not in danger range yet, but if he starts getting 4, 5 ground weaknesses counting on Bulu every single week, that's where it starts to become a risk. So, and I've seen that happen before for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing too is you have to be careful because, for example, opposing steel types can come in on Metagross, and really they only have to fear a Hammer Arm getting dropped, which slows Metagross down for them, because now Metagross can't fire off its own Earthquake in return.
Yeah, and so it is, a little bit of a catch-22 there. You kind of want to take the mons that benefit from the thing to get the synergies, but you also don't want to overdo it on that. So we'll see how this team pans out. I like Metagross. I like the Bullet Punch access here. Just being a little bit of a revenge killer if needed. It's a good bulky Mon, gives him rocks. So does the jobs he needs to do.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the not Corviknight. Skarmory coming in here to pair with the Hydreigon and the Slowbro. Once again, we're going to talk about this repeatedly. Electric types, give me an answer to them. A lot of teams not yet taking their ground type, so we'll see how those start going. But Hydreigon at least resists here. Skarmory, I like it with this team. He needed access to rocks. Spikes help, and Defog is good. Skarmory is going to be defensive primarily, but it's been doing that since Gen 2, and it's been doing it well, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's a great hazard control Mon, great phaser. The only problem is if you get it into a too passive set where you can't attack, then you're kind of just screwed.
Yeah, and you forget this thing has base 75 speed with Taunt, so it actually has like a couple of utility moves that it can pull out of nowhere if needed against certain other bulky hazard setters to not be so passively like allowing for setup, but... next up, speaking of passive, and speaking of bulky, and speaking of hazard setters that Skarmory can taunt, we've got Toxapex being paired with Clefable on what is quickly becoming the team that I least want to face this season.
Such a stall team on 20-minute timer.
Yeah, so in honor of that timer and in honor of this team, we're moving on to the end of round slide. That's all we're going to talk about Toxapex for. So here is the end of round 3, and we'll quickly go through our favorites if you want to go ahead and tell us yours.
For me, it's Primarina. I think that's, as far as how team synergy goes, maybe Zydoge would be the next closest thing, but Primarina just filled that team out so well on its Fairy Dragon Steel core.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. This was a weird round, in my opinion.
There was a lot of Mons that went early, it feels like, but also a lot of Mons that made teams, you know, like they really set that team apart, like that Primarina pick. The Mamoswine, round 3 Mamoswine is scary. Always is. And it's about where Mamoswine started going in the draft, so. Just a heads up, people, before we continue, I just want to give everyone a heads up, including my co-host, who I haven't mentioned this to. After round 5, so one more full wheel of the draft, we are going to take about a 5-10 minute break just for both of us to have our throats not die, get some more water, stand up, and then we'll come right back into it. So just heads up on that. That'll be coming up in a couple of rounds. But cool. For the meantime, let's continue. Someone in the draft said, quote, now all it needs is Gliscor. Well, what about Tangrowth instead? Because we are just going hard stall with this. And yeah, the double regenerator with Wish Passing and Heal Bell Clefable paired with the bulky Latias. This is gonna suck to face, and I'm moving on. That's it.
There's no point. It's stall. That's the team.
Next up is the Xurkitree. Xurkitree losing Tail Glow and Hidden Power, really setting it back, but that doesn't mean it can't do its job. It loses Z-Hypnosis, it loses Tail Glow, it loses Hidden Power, and it's still a decent Mon, all things considered. I mean, Jolteon, we all were like, Jolteon's going to suck because it lost access to Signal Beam and Hidden Power, and it's still, every single draft, Jolteon gets drafted somewhere along the line. I think Xurkitree is going to be similar. Everyone's going to smack on it, and then it's going to be drafted, and it's going to do its job fine.
Yeah, I don't know if this was worth a tier 2 pick, but it is still a fantastic electric type. It just really got the shaft from...
Yeah, it just got an unfortunate group of things that got removed that was everything it did. So next up is the Crobat pick. So, like I said, don't stack your ground weaknesses, and he heard me and pulled out Crobat. I love Crobat. Gives him a good speed tier between Zeraora and right now, what was the next fastest Mon on his team, Bulu. So he's going to need to fill that in a little bit, but really good Mon here. Nasty Plot sets are really solid by themselves. I mean, you forget, you sleep on it, but Sludge Bomb, Air Slash, Heat Wave, Shadow Ball, like, it has access to pretty good Nasty Plot sets. It can run Toxic. It can run Super Fang. It can run a whole bunch of different sets. Defog with Boots. It has Roost. It has surprisingly good bulk for what it is, because you don't always have to invest a ton into speed for it. I like Crobat.
I was going to say, I think it picked up Hurricane too, if I remember correctly, in the DLC, so it's got even better stab now than Air Slash.
Yeah. All right, next up is Lucario. Finally, we see an answer to Ice types on this team. We've been waiting, and we've got it. So, I think Lucario is an underrated Mon in draft. Hot take. I like Lucario.
Yeah, I've never used it. I know that it's a very potent wall breaker with the fact that it can set up both physical and special, has priority on both sides, and it's just generally a phenomenal Mon. It's something that definitely appreciates sticky webs, but I've yet to get the chance to use it.
I mean, 91 speed, you know, is it 90 or 91? It might be 90.
Yeah, I think it's 90.
Solid speed tier, outspeeds a lot of those, you know, really strong offensive Mons like Mamoswine and stuff to just make sure it gets that little jump. And Vacuum Wave, you're right, like you said, Mach Punch, Vacuum Wave, Bullet Punch, all really, really good for it to have. So, yeah, I like Lucario. I think it's an answer to Ice types. I think he needs more. It's not that bulky, but it's a start. We're going to see this draft filling itself out. And not to be outdone, we have the next steel fighting type going, literally the next pick in Cobalion. So the one that most people generally choose over Lucario, for it being faster, having arguably better offensive options with things like Volt Switch. It has access to rocks, which Lucario does not. It's hard to not directly compare these two Mons, but I like them both. I think Cobalion does more for this team, and Lucario does maybe a little bit more for the other team, which is good. Because Lucario needs to break Ice types by having that priority, which Cobalion doesn't have.
Yeah. I will say from my own experience with Cobalion that I tend to find it a little lackluster, but for this team, it definitely serves a purpose in, you know, taking those steel type hits and clearing those steel types out. This thing behind Veil with rock polish and weakness policy could be very scary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and next up we have your pick here.
Yeah, it's me. I picked Nidoking. I have not used Nidoking in a long time. It's had mixed success for me, but we'll try it again here in Gen 8. Fantastic Life Orb user. Choice specs is very nice on it. It gives me T-Spikes. I think Nidoking got T-Spikes. Maybe it's just Queen. I might be wrong on that. I know it has Stealth Rocks.
I think it has T-Spikes.
It got high horsepower in the update, so that means it doesn't have to rely on Earthquake against, you know, Grassy Surge teams. It does have the move pool to go both physical and special. You really can't predict too hard on that. I don't know. I like it. It's, again, a Gen 1 Mon that got all the moves because there was nothing else to use, and we'll see how it works out for me this time around.
All right, so next up we have the Galarian Moltres. So the final of the three birds getting taken here. I think this will function in a similar way to like Yveltal in terms of how much raw destructive power it can provide.
I've seen this thing 6-0 sweep on ladders.
Yeah, it is surprisingly strong. It has Nasty Plot. It can just do... I mean, yeah, it's missing Oblivion Wing, the most broken move in the game, but I think that's okay. It still does a ton of work against any opponent. It has a stronger Dark Pulse, so still gets the flinch chance, so why not? And I think it has Hurricane. and it just goes absolutely ham with its stab coverage.
He gets access to Nasty Plot, and if you put it behind screens and make it bulky enough to take a hit, if you give a Nasty Plot off and trigger Berserker, you're just screwed. And that's where those sweeps start to come in.
Yep. So, I like this thing. I think discount Yveltal is probably a decent way of thinking about it. Next up is Ribombi here, which is another web setter, and actually pairs fairly well with this team as this team is being built out. Gives him that first mon above 100 speed tier. He had 2 mons at it, but now finally gets to break past that. Gives him webs, gives him a quiver dance, gives him good stab options, U-turn, defog. I don't know, good mon all over. It has its shortcomings, but it's a pretty solid mon.
Yeah, I mean, so until I used Araquanid, I would have called this the best sticky web setter because it's fast and it's reliable in setting it. It makes for a good Scarfer and a good Specs Abuser, Quiver Dance, Setup Sweeper. The one thing, losing Hidden Power really hurts this thing because Steel types now are pretty free to check in on it. But it is fantastic. It does give him webs, and he's got a fantastic anti-webber, anti-defogger on his team. So it just, again, continues to pair with Jirachi and help put Zapdos in position where it just comes in and sweeps late game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like the music has stopped, so we're going to restart it real quick. All right, so next up is the Heliolisk being picked up here by the Vancouver Kyogres. This is the ultimate weathermon, right? Like, it can do anything in any weather. It doesn't mind, and I love this team so far.
Yeah, it does function in every single weather, and we've seen a sand team and a rain team already come on the board. So if somebody drafts Sun, Heliolisk pretty much is going to come to every single one of those games. It is fantastic as a choice specs user. It is fantastic as a Scarfer. It is fantastic with a Life Orb in its hands.
Its coverage is just ridiculous when you actually get into the nitty gritty of it. Even just normal electric and water is good enough, but it has Dark Pulse.
Dragon Pulse.
Dragon Pulse if it needs it. I just clicked to the next mon, so we're doing it. All right, because this is one I think we're going to spend a little more time on. Regieleki, we put in tier 4. We tried to tier it, tried to start the draft like on release day of the meta. I said base 200 speed is ridiculous. They said it doesn't get any coverage for ground types, and so here we are. It's base 200 speed. Who okayed that? Who said that was going to be fine? Who at Game Freak was like, this mod
that was tired
is fair?
Of Deoxys speed being number 1.
So I said this should be higher. They said tier 4. We're in tier 4. That's what's going to be for this season, and the fact that it went round 4 and made it this long is kind of nuts, because it's way better than that. I know Wolfie just got to number 1 in the world with it, but I still stand by the fact that I think, tier 3 maybe is where it could settle. Tier 4 might be a little too low, but I don't honestly think it's all that great of a move or a mon when considering that its only coverage is Acro, Extreme Speed, and Ancient Power are like the best moves that it has. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a fast electric type that gets walled by any sort of ground type. Yeah, but it has access to screens, so it's not like switching in your ground type. Like, it can get a free turn to screen. It outspeeds most Scarfers without even really needing to invest.
It outspeeds everything under a Modest Nature. Like, I've looked at this. You can give it Modest Nature, and it'll outspeed everything in the meta, except for, I believe, Zeraora, which walls it, and Dragapult and Ninjask are the only 3 things that are as fast as this with no speed investment.
Yeah, exactly. So it's ridiculous. This was a mistiering, but that's what happens when you try to start drafts on day of release. You make mistakes, and here we are.
It also gets rapid spin, so there is that.
Oh, it needs more speed. Yes.
And it gets rapid spin and agility. So rapid spin, agility, max speed, jolly nature plus
Electro Ball.
electro ball. There you go.
There it is. That's a set. Next up is the Roman Polion's picking up Slurpuff here. This was actually a snipe. This was the first snipe that of mine this draft. I was kind of counting on Slurpuff, but didn't make it quite to me. We were just a few picks away, but really solid Mon, honestly. I got 6-0'd by this despite having a Celesteela on my team, so feels bad. Belly Drum is ridiculous. Unburden. Popping with Belly Drum is ridiculous. Webs is nice, and it also has special moves if it needs them.
Yeah, it losing return kind of hurt it a little bit, but otherwise it's a fantastic web setter. So.
Yeah. And I mean, Player Rough Drain Punch usually covers the team, so.
Yep, Vish plus webs. There you see it.
All right, next we have the more expensive Calyrex. Since everyone's comparing them anyway, I might as well call it that. But definitely a better Mon. Celebi going here. I think this is early, even for a tier 2 here. Celebi often doesn't get drafted. I think it can be taken later, but good Mon for his team. He definitely doesn't have a bug weakness right now. In fact, he has 2 quad resists already. He has resistances already to ice as well. So we said that he wouldn't have to worry about that as much thanks to his flying type not being weak to it and Heatran. He's got another rocker now, which is good for him to have. Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, U-Turn. Just a good Mon, all things considered. Natural Cure is super solid, so I like Celebi. I just think it could have been taken a little later.
Yeah, I would agree. It does fit this team nicely, but it's definitely something that could have been a later pick. The one thing here, he has no hazard removal right now still, and that's kind of a problem when your flying type doesn't get defog.
Yep, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that as time goes along. Next up is the Lele, Mamoswine, Salamence team, and this time finally picking up a Mon that is not just in a huge offensive threat, trying to pull that team together. Registeel coming in here hot as a tier 3. This was also a snipe, though I actually don't think I noticed that this got taken for 2 more rounds. I also wanted this Mon, so tough round for me here at the end, but I was going to take Registeel in like round 6 or something and just didn't even notice till I was about to take it that it was not even on the board anymore. But this is a rocker. This is a bulky pivot. This is a Thunder Waver. This gives just, good solid seismic tosses. I like Registeel. Not too much more to say about it.
I believe that body press too. So.
Sure did. Iron Defense body press.
Yep, that makes it even more problematic for opposing steel types to come in.
In this league, Reggie was tier 4 as well, by the way. That's why I wanted it so bad.
Yeah. This was a problematic round for me, losing Registeel, because at the time I didn't have Kartana.
Yeah, because you picked that up at the end of the draft, right?
Yep, I needed steel types. But
So next up, we have the Torn Eye going here, which is a Mon I used once and couldn't make work. It has all the right traits. It's fast. It has Prankster. It has great coverage. It's got good offensive stats. And for some reason, I just could not get this thing to do what I wanted to do. Prankster defogs really well, but this team doesn't even care that much about it. So Knockoff, I guess, is a solid move that it has. Good physical and special coverage, so good mixed attacker. I'm not sure, but I struggled with this, even though I think it was a good Mon on paper.
yeah, and I mean, as far as the team fit, again, I'd like to say Politoed looks so much better now that Torn Eye is here, because Regieleki, Politoed is still going to be weak to electric types, but it's not 4 times weak. Regieleki, Coco, Zeraora, Heliolisk, they all kind of want to know this team's location right now.
Yeah, we've got a couple teams that really don't want to see an electric type.
This team needs a ground type and needs it bad.
Like yesterday. Next up, we have Aggron being taken here. This is... I'm just gonna keep saying it every time this goes around. When are we gonna start seeing the early picks that we expect to see? This team looks like it's taking from round 4 through 7 already, and it's currently only round 4. So I like Aggron. I'm not gonna say anything bad about the Mon itself. I just don't think it was at risk of being sniped here.
I feel like this is oh crap, all the steel types are gone, time to panic mode, because I honestly was going to take this thing round 5 with all the steel types that were coming off the board.
Oh, maybe then, yeah, just the worry that all the steel types were going. But next up, we have myself picking up the Obstagoon, another Mon I've never drafted before, but thought would be really interesting. This team, not as synergistic as some of the other ones you guys are seeing right now. And if I was looking at it objectively, I would be like, where in the world is this team going? I don't even know. But I promise, and like I think about all the other teams so far, there's a plan. I also was going to take Slurpuff here, but it got sniped, so here we are. So I kind of panic-picked Obstagoon. But Obstagoon was sort of on the plan anyway, so...
I think you'll enjoy this. I've used it a couple of other times. The Guts Facade set or the Guts Flame Orb set is really, really nice. Defiant sets are really nice for opposing Sticky Web users, which your team kind of just says no to anyways because of Clear Body Dragapult. And like I said a few rounds ago, what is one of the best checks to Dragapult? Dark type and normal typing. You got that combination right here, Obstagoon being one of the really nice Dragapult checks. The only unfortunate thing with Goon is the fact that it didn't get either Extreme Speed or Sucker Punch, so it has no form of priority.
Yeah, I agree. It really needs priority, but Parting Shot is also really good for it to have, and so hopefully we'll find a way to use it. Base 95 speed is also very workable, even without priority, so. All right, so here is the end of round 4, as we will talk about our favorite picks here. I think mine has to be the Regieleki tier 4 at this point. I think it's just we're gonna see how it is this season. This is the first time we're using it. Obviously there could be mistiering. He could have gotten huge value, or maybe we're overvaluing it in this draft recap stream and it's actually a mediocre Mon in draft. I'm not sure, if we're being honest, but
yeah, for me, it's going to be the Heliolisk. I think that just fit the team so well, and it basically tells every other weather team, one, it takes them on off of their team, because I know that was a snipe for everybody. And two, it's like, yeah, go ahead and bring your weather. I'm going to go ahead and exploit whatever you do, unless you bring hail, because then I don't have anything.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to round 5, and then again at the end of round 5, we're going to take a little break, just so that we don't die. I will start us off here. I will be taking Swampert, my ground type, finally squared away. It got flip turn, and I was like, this seems fun. There's really not a whole lot of other thought that went into taking Swampert here. It's just a good rock setter, which I have Nihilego, but I wanted another one. I needed a water type. I needed a ground type. I like flip turn. I also really wanted a ground type that could be used on the special side for earth power, and this kind of just fit it just checked so many boxes that I was like, there's no reason not to take it here. It's gonna be helpful for me to have.
Yeah, and you did get a couple of other boosts. I'm trying to think of what it was. You got liquidation now, so you can run for those defense drops instead of flinches. It's perfectly up to you how you want to play that. There's something else it got that I can't think off the top of my head right now. Because I remember it being... Because I just got done using Mega Swampert with Gen 8 move pool, and I can't remember what the... Oh, I got Body Press, so defensive sets now.
True. And also, if I am the kind of player, everyone knows this, it's not a secret, who really likes using creative, unique, weird sets. And this thing has both counter and mirror coat. So check it.
Darkest Lariat was the other thing I was trying to think of. It picked up Darkest Lariat as well for giving it some dark type stab.
Yeah, so this thing picking up lots of coverage in this generational shift, so I like it. And it is, again, another ground type that can run Earth Power instead of Earthquake. So combos well with the Rillaboom. Next up is the Azelf here. Okay, here is finally a Mon that I think really, really solid for the round and the timing. We're finally getting into it. Azelf, base 115 speed rocker, really, really good. Or is it 120? Yeah, it's 115 speed, 125 in each of its attacks. U-turn, knockoff, stab, psychic or zen headbutt, or Psyshock, depending on how you want to run this thing. Nasty plot. It's just, I love Azelf. I drafted it once. I've only drafted it once, but that time I had a blast using it.
Yeah, this team also says no to ground types. So Aggron and Tentacruel are both protected very well here with 2 Levitate Mons and a flying ground type.
Yeah, absolutely, which is really nice because you worry about that ground weakness, especially since the grassy terrain setters have been taken already.
Yeah, and this team has a lot of good, hazard setters as well. Basically everything but Rotom sets them. Sorry.
Yeah, and Rotom removes them, which is nice. So he's got hazard control all over the place as well. Next up is Electivire. So correctly perhaps acknowledging that an electric immunity might be a priority here. Opting for Electivire over Jolteon, which was still available at the time. Motor Drive is a great ability. There's no two ways about it. And base 95 speed getting boosted with Motor Drive. Also really nice. It has really solid coverage. I like Electivire. I think this is a little early, but correctly identifying what the need was and trying to fill the hole, I think you can't really blame someone for doing that. So really, I'm into this pick.
Yeah, and it pairs nicely because he's got 2 ground immunities, and ground types are already going to struggle, with trying to find a way to switch in. So I think this was a good pick, but I do agree it might have been a little early.
Next up is Vaporeon here. So Registeel, Vaporeon, we are starting to see the offensive core pairing with the defensive core here. And this team is absolutely coming together right now. There's no single Mon, I think, that can win a matchup against this roster. You'll have to play a really good game of 6v6 and make sure you're playing well because this team has threats up and down so far.
Yeah, and it does, with Vaporeon getting Flip Turn, it does make it a viable Wish Passer, even more viable Wish Passer than it already was. Just being able to Wish and then Flip Turn out. So now Salamence isn't the only Wish Passer. Obviously, it's a very bulky water type, known for being a good Phys-Def and Spadef wall. Water Absorb being fantastic, so I like it. I like it on this team.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a really good Mon here. Now for the opposite of a bulky water type, we have the frailest water type of them all. Sharpedo coming in hot here. I have never drafted Sharpedo, but it seems fun. Just Speed Boost is a great ability and makes Mons better. You can go for Waterfall flinches pretty easily or Liquidation defense drops. Stab Crunch, it's immune to Prankster, which is nice because of that dark typing. Got Ice Fang, it's got Psychic Fangs, it's got, pretty solid coverage. So I think it's a good Mon. It wishes it had Strong Jaw, but it's a solid Mon with Speed Boost, so.
It also picked up Close Combat this generation.
True, because it punches you with its dorsal fin.
Yeah.
But never to be outdone, our next player has a Mon opening its mouth even wider. That is Hippowdon. And finally, we see the first Sand Setter actually go. We've seen a couple teams that look like they were ready to be Sand teams that hadn't actually taken their Setter yet. Hippowdon, the first one to actually get drafted. Not a surprise that it comes to the team with the Dracovish Corviknight. I think this is the correct pick here.
Yeah, and again, what I said with Aaron taking Corviknight, what's one of the best ways to check Dracovish? Corviknight. What's one of the best ways to check a Stally Corviknight? Hippowdon.
So
because you just whirlwind them out.
Yeah, so removing all the checks from the board is really, really solid. And they all pair really well together, so.
Yeah, he's done his due diligence in making sure that he puts his team in position where it can't be checked easily and can get rolling.
Absolutely. Next up, we have the Crocodile coming in here. Whoops. Crocodile is... I love it. Finally has a rock setter on this team. And a ground type as well, which I think this team wanted. As we said, it needs a way to answer the electric types. Regieleki, it's just so frail that you can't really switch it into anything. Even resists do probably about 40% to it without screens up. Crocodile at least gives him some bulk, gives him a ground type, gives him a dark type to be immune to Prankster, gives him rocks, gives him knockoff, gives him earthquake. So all things that this team wanted.
Very good Scarfer, very good band user. It also picked up Scale Shot this generation, so you could run, setup sets and then Scale Shot to get your speed.
Absolutely. Next up is Zarude. So this team that we've been touting so much, I don't really admittedly know anything about this mon. I know that everyone says it is underperforming and not as scary as it looks, but I don't really actually know much about it.
Please, for the love of God, would this team draft a Sand Setter? That way we have Zarude in Sandstorm. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird mon. Its ability does not do it any justice, but I haven't seen any data on it other than it's, what you said. It underperforms, it seems, on the ladder. So
next up is Incineroar. Speaking of overperforming, actually, on this end, Incineroar always feels like whatever you think it's going to do, it just does better. On so many teams that I've drafted in the past, I always have to look at a team and be like, why is Incineroar the biggest problem for my team? I can't figure out why, but it consistently is just a nuisance for me to deal with.
It's so bulky. You throw an Assault Vest on it, and it just sits there as a defensive wall.
Yeah, and if you don't want to throw an Assault Vest, you throw Boots on it. It's still got Intimidate. Like, it's just so good, and just dumb bulky for some reason. I don't know why. It just always overperforms.
John Cena has entered the chat.
Next up is Slow King going to the Atlanta Victory Stars. It got Teleport. It's got Nasty Plot. It's had that for a while. It's got, just Regenerator as well. I like this pick a lot for this team. I think Slowbro would have potentially been preferred here, only insofar as Sylveon and Slow King are both super specially bulky. There isn't really a physical wall here, but it's just, I think this
you can make
fits a whole.
King physically defensive.
Yeah, absolutely. It just is more naturally specially defensive.
Yeah.
Next up is the Vikavolt. Vikavolt is gonna be joining your team, so if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so with all the speed that was coming off the board, most of the over base 100 mons were gone. I started thinking, well, I need to figure out how to play slow. So Sticky Webs sound nice. Araquanid went off the board. Rabombi went off the board. So I went with my third favorite in Vikavolt. Vikavolt hits like a truck, especially. Obviously, Levitate's really nice. Gives me a Volt Switch. We'll see how it plays out. I've used it one other time, ironically, with Nidoking and Vikavolt, or Kartana, so we'll see if that...
I think of my past with Draft League, Vikavolt is the most successful Sticky Webber I've used, as far as what it can do. I also like that it doesn't need Sticky Webs every week.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to bring them.
Which I feel like some other Sticky Webbers sort of feel like they should bring Sticky Webs or they're not getting their full value. Vikavolt does other things. All right, next up we have the Flygon here. Finally getting the Dragon type here after the glut of them went in the first round. And I like Flygon on this team, if we're being honest. It's a speed tier that, yeah, it shares it with Victini, but it does a different thing on some level. And it's a Dragon type not weakened by Misty Terrain. It appreciates Veil. It fits the team, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this pick was so fly that it was gone before I knew what happened. Sorry, that was so forced. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice mon. I've never particularly had too much success with Flygon, but with how he's got it paired around, it is really nice for being able to set up behind Veil.
Yeah. Next up, speaking of really nice picks, I think we have finally gotten the payoff we've been waiting for on this team. We've been saying ice, 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 and now we've got Milotic to take those ice hits. So Freeze Dry still says hello, but everything else gets just stopped. Every other ice move does probably 10%.
Yeah, Milotic, again, the rise of the move Flip Turn has made a lot of these bulky water types become much more viable. Vaporeon, Milotic, just giving them that ability to come in, sponge the hit, and then pivot out on the electric type or the grass type trying to come in. Milotic having a very decent move pool, Ice Beam, Dragon Pulse, Dragon Breath. Obviously, there's coil sets. There's it got triple axle, so physical Milotic is actually a viable thing now.
Don't sleep.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mon in Gen 8 to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm curious. Next up, we have Arcanine going on to this Bulu team, and I like this pick. I think it's a good mon. I worry about the ground weakness. But, you're going to take a steel, you're going to take a fire, you're going to take an electric, so you just got to suck it up and accept the fact that sometimes those three are all going to be weak to ground, and you just have to play with that. And I think Arcanine, with Intimidate, can help manage the ground weakness just a little bit.
It can be very annoyingly bulky, the fact that it has
Morning Sun.
Morning Sun, and it is a momentum mon with the fact that it can teleport around as well. I believe it picked up Play Rough in close combat, so that also helps too.
I think it actually had both of those in Gen 7.
Did it have them already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it picked something else up, and I'm forgetting what it picked up. But and don't forget about the Burn Up set. Yes, I'm fully aware of what Burn Up Arcanine can do to me. I've lost 2 playoff games to Burn Up Arcanine.
And speaking of fire types, we've got Chandelure coming in hot as the next pick. I love Chandelure. It is one of my favorite mons, just in format in general. It always does well in every team I put it on. And being able to Flash Fire, Infiltrator, it's got such ridiculously good coverage. With obviously its dual stabs, Energy Ball, Psychic, Dark Pulse. Like, it's got such fun coverage. It has Flame Charge if you need it. I love Chandelure.
Yeah, it's a very good Specs and Scarfer as well. Pairs beautifully with Hydreigon. Everything that Hydreigon doesn't want to take a hit from, Chandelure will take, and everything Chandelure doesn't want to take a hit from, Hydreigon just kind of laughs off. So I think this is a beautiful offensive pairing right there.
Absolutely. And for the final pick of this round, we have Porygon Z. So we're seeing some offense finally from this team.
I was going to say, at least it wasn't P2.
If it was P2, I would just stop telling you what the mons on this team were. No, we're seeing some offense, and I think we're turning a corner. I think we'll start seeing some more offense as we move forward with this team. So Porygon Z, super fun. Really solid adaptability sets. Just tri-attack spamming is super good. Or you can run download. And have it just be a absolute killer. Great coverage. It's one of those normal types that just gets ridiculous coverage. I love it. I love this pick.
Yep. Functions as a very good breaker from Choice Specs or Life Orb. Just be careful that you make sure you have the coverage to take on a Zeraora that tries to sub-bulk up on you, because if your only attacks are Thunderbolt and Tri-Attack, you're kind of screwed.
So next, we have the Round 5 recap screen, and like I said, at the end of this round, we are going to take about a 5-minute break. So it is currently my time zone, 1:53, now 1:54, so we'll be back around 2. But before we go, let's just give our favorite picks this round.
I think from a need and utility standpoint, I love the Milotic pick the most out of this round. There are a lot of really good picks here, but My Lodic just took that team and fixed so many problems that it was experiencing.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's anything else that kind of stands in the same light as Milotic in terms of solving the team. Maybe the Hippowdon, but I think you're right. I think Milotic is the number one pick here. All right, so we're gonna just get up, stretch, go to the bathroom, get some water, and we'll be back at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So in about 6 minutes. So we'll see you guys then.
Get some food too. I'm ready when you are. I've just been entertaining the chat. I'm good to go too.
All right, good. It's 2:01. I apologize to everybody involved, but that's how life goes sometimes. So
we started a minute early, so we got our extra minute back.
That's true. we're just averaging it out. So we're gonna start off the second half of the draft now with Heracross, and like Porygon Z, I am just glad to see a offensive mon on this roster. And yeah, so Heracross is a mon I've used before and fell in love with. I actually, funnily enough, planned a draft around Heracross and then took it in round 6. So it's the right time to take Heracross, apparently. Super stressful, though, if you plan an entire draft around a mon that you're not intending to draft till like the middle of the picks. But I love Heracross. It's so strong. And Moxie or Guts, oh, it's so much fun. It's just such a fun mon.
Subsets are like sub-gut sets are very problematic. Sub-swords dance sets are very problematic.
Great coverage
Scarf
moves.
Moxie. Yeah, I just wish it got U-turn. Like, that's the one thing I wish that Heracross got to make it perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's such a fun team. Or I say team. Such a fun mon, specifically. The team is not something I probably would draft.
No, this is not a fun team.
Next up is Nidoqueen. So you have taken the king. Now the queen has been drafted. The little bit bulkier side, similar to the Latios style of draft here. And I like Nidoqueen. I have used it a couple of times. I like it. I think it's a great mon. And I think it pairs well with this team. That sounded like there was going to be a but there. There wasn't. I just like Nidoqueen. I don't know why I said it in such a way that sounded like I was going to say something negative. I have nothing negative to say about it.
Yeah, I've never used it. I just know that it tends to be a bit bulkier than King. So maybe I should use it because I'm always struggling with my bulk. But it gives them more hazards and spikes and T-spikes. And it has, a large move pool just like Nidoking. So.
And this is a team, I think, as time goes along, Nidoqueen fits it so well because look at the need for a grounded poison here. Some of these mons hate T-spikes. T-spikes would look so clean against this team. I know Skarmory can get rid of them and so can Hydreigon without being affected, but they just look really good against this team to pressure those mons to come in at inopportune times. Whereas Nidoqueen now, you just say, nope, I don't worry about your T-spikes. I'll set my note up instead.
Yeah, the one thing I won't criticize this team about is it is very slow relative to some of these other teams.
True, but there is clearly two Trick Room setters already.
Rivals.
So yeah, we'll see if the speed comes along later on. But we're gonna draft power here in round 6. We are coming out swinging with Haxorus now, and I don't know. I love this mon. Again, I think part of me wishes that I was better at hyper offense, so I could draft teams that just had the Heracrosses, the Haxoruses, and the Porygon Zs and make it work. My playstyle is very much balanced and always has been. But I love Haxorus.
This plus Zero Aura is lethal.
It's just such a fun... This team looks fun. And should be a lot of fun. Again, I think the real worry here is that currently his only ground coverage is Earthquake on both Metagross and Haxorus. It might get high horsepower, but with the grassy terrain, there's a little bit of a liability there. But Mold Breaker is such a good ability. Unnerve is a surprisingly good ability in draft. A lot of teams will run berries to try to take that one hit from the mon they're worried about. Haxorus just says, I don't care, and just breaks right through him, which is super nice.
And this thing has two different ways of setting up, because it can Swords Dance Scale Shot up on you, which, if you need to know what that's going to do to you, go watch one of PokeGame's videos where he did that, and it rolled. Or it's got the standard Dragon Dance set. Choice Banded sets are very, very nice. Scarf sets can function pretty nice as well. And the big kicker, and I think you felt this in another league from me, was first impression off of this thing.
Yeah, no, first impression
rather
is
nasty.
And it picked up close combat as well, so really good mod. Next up is a Mon that I was not expecting to get drafted in round 6 at all.
No.
It is Mag Mortar, a Mon that, God, it's so interesting. It has a good special attack, decent speed, and its abilities just let it down. If it had a good ability, this thing would be so solid, but it just gets slightly let down. It could run such a good Assault Vest set, but it just doesn't have an ability to really function with, and I want Magmortar to be better than it is every time.
Yeah, give this thing like Flash Fire and it'd be pretty decent. The one thing that you might be sleeping on just a little bit is its physical move pool is pretty decent as well. It does have Flame Charge and Belly Drum, so it could set itself up. Yeah, it's got Belly Drum. I ran it in APA one time. Just be very careful because this thing can be a setup sweeper on you if you are not careful.
Fun. That may make it, a little higher on the tier, on the list of things that I would have expected, but I still wasn't prepared for it in round 6 here.
Yeah, no, it definitely is early. So
next up is Jolteon. We're starting to see teams fill out with these tier 4s. There were a few of them that went early, the Regieleki and the Registeel, things that may have been a little under tiered. But we're starting to see the tier 4s really fill in at this point as Jolteon comes in. I think Jolteon, actually, I've mentioned a couple times this draft, fits on a number of teams. This is actually not one of the ones I would have pegged as a I need Jolteon team. But like we've mentioned, how many times now, electric types in this meta seem so good that picking up a strong electric type is just a solid option, even if its coverage is limited.
Yeah, and one thing, so you're looking at this team in Jolteon, it got Signal Beam removed, it got a couple of other moves taken away from it, and you're like, well, Jolteon's not very good anymore. Here's the thing, Jolteon plus Alolan Ninetales makes for a very intriguing situation where ground types, if Hail is up, can no longer switch because of Weather Ball, which gives Jolteon hidden power ice, essentially.
Yeah, Weather Ball, picking up Weather Ball this gen and pairing it with Ninetales is actually super solid. It is a Wish Passer, which, I mean, maybe not the premier Wish Passers, but this team doesn't mind having one.
Yeah.
And the really nice thing about Jolteon, it lost some coverage, as you mentioned. It picked up Weather Ball, which is super nice. But the really nice thing about Jolteon, I think, that is underrated in its sets, is that basically the moves it lost freed up a slot for Wish. And if you can Wish with Jolteon and the ground type comes in and then switch into Finny or Flygon as they go for some coverage move to try to catch the switch, they're back to full anyway. You don't need it to be 130 HP Wish. You just need it to be that little bit of, removing the chip they're trying to do to the next Mon that comes in. So Jolteon has that ability to keep other Mons around, which is really nice.
Yep.
Next up is the Cofagrigus, and it is shiny on this sprite, I think. I actually don't know for sure, but it looks shiny.
Yeah, that looks like it.
So...
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's like I said that, and then I was like, maybe. But Cofagrigus coming in hot on your roster here, so...
Yeah, it gives me another T-Spiker, so Nidoking doesn't necessarily have to keep running it. It gives me a defensive wall, which is something that I was sorely lacking. Togekiss can function as a special wall when need be, but this thing is a true physical wall. And like I said, I was running out of, really fast Mons to pick from, especially with Jolteon coming off the board now. There's not a lot of speed left out there for me. So what do? I'm just going to go ahead and play around and go into Trick Room. I can now put Vikavolt under Trick Room. I can run Slow Togekiss under Trick Room. If I'm facing a Regieleki team, I can put Urshifu under Trick Room and just start, bashing skulls with Urshifu. So it gives me the Trick Room element that I've never used in Draft League before, while giving me more hazards and a defensive wall.
I like Trick Room personally. I hadn't used it until recently, but served me well, so. And Cofagrigus is a really good Trick Room setter here, so certainly not going to say anything bad about it right now. Next up is the Blissey. Thank God this wasn't taken by the Clefable team, but...
I was going to say, it's a good thing this isn't on the Clefable team.
But Sylveon, Slowking, Blissey, I mean, do not try to hit this team with a special attack. Go ham with physical attacks. You're all set, but don't touch it with a special attack because it won't do anything. But yeah, Blissey here, a little bit more passive, but less passive than Chansey per se, but more passive than the rest of this team would suggest. I think more passive than this team needed in its rocker. I think there were better options for stealth rockers that could have given this team a little bit more offensive oomph than Blissey did.
Yeah. Yeah, don't hit this team with a special attack.
All right, next up is the Miltank here. Speaking of stealth rockers with a little bit more offensive oomph. Not a whole lot, though. But a lot of teams that were very bulky at the beginning are starting to fill out their offensive cores, and now a lot of teams that were offensive at the beginning starting to fill in their bulk. I like this. This is an underrated thing in drafts, but I think teams that have two base 100s where one, or two of the same base speed, where one runs speed and one doesn't, feels like you've actually added a speed tier, even if they have the same numerical base speed. Because now your opponent has to think like, okay, am I just going to try to outpace uninvested Miltank, or do I need to run like more speed on this Mon to try to outpace something like a slightly invested Jirachi or something? And you start having multiple speed tiers. So it actually doesn't end up, because almost nobody runs speed on Miltank ever. That isn't to say you couldn't, it's just almost nobody does. And Zapdos, Galarian Zapdos can now run Adamant while Jirachi runs Jolly and Miltank runs nothing, and you can actually sort of start to learn other people's speed tiers as the game goes along based on what they outspeed and what they don't, as long as you're careful with your calcs.
Yep, and the one thing, which if they ever make Gen 2 remakes, I feel sorry for us when we have to go up against Whitney, because they gave Miltank body press.
They sure did, and it definitely didn't need it, but here we are.
Nope. Defense curl, roll out, and body press. There you go.
All right, speaking of bulky Mons, Golbat coming in here. Another bulky Mon that I think may be early, but does give a really interesting option. Golbat, it's got same thing I was talking about with Crobat earlier, except a little bit less offensive, but Super Fang is still really good. It's got Defog, Toxic, Roost, a really solid bulky set as needed.
I mean, it's pretty much Crobat light, so it functions in almost the exact same stand. It doesn't defog as well because it wants to hold that Eviolite from time to time, but it still does pretty much everything that Crobat does, just slightly slower.
Yeah, but still a really good Mon for this team. I think, again, maybe a little early, but not a bad pick. Next up is Glastrier. He says really confidently, not knowing how to say that name at all. Ice Horse is here, and we did ban Spectrier, so there will not be Ghost Horse. That thing we decided was just too strong. But Glastrier we have in the format, and we put it as tier 2. Whether or not that's correct, we don't know. I think that's a pretty reasonable place for it based on what it's been doing. The coverage on this thing is ridiculous. I don't even think Webbs will necessarily save it, but he could Trick Room with this roster if he wants to. But it is physically bulky, it is got ridiculous coverage, and hits like a truck, and basically has Moxie too.
I mean, it's just bulky in general. Base 100 HP, 130 on the physical defense, 110 on the special defense, and 145 attack stat. The fact that it's so slow is the biggest thing. And I'm honestly surprised that this one was allowed and the Ghost one was banned, because the Ghost one's move pool coverage sucks, but this one's got the move pool coverage. Yeah, it's slow, but it does not matter when you look at its coverage.
So I can I can kind of speak to that really briefly because I was the one pressing for the Ghost Horse to be banned on the grounds that it's too fast and it forces every single team to draft a defensive dark type that is not weak to ground. And I think that's just a little annoying because it's one mon, so you only face it one time. But if you don't have a defensive dark type, you just lose. Whereas this thing is not an auto win button. It's a very good mon, but it's not an auto win button. And I've seen what Poltegeist can do, and Poltegeist isn't as oppressive as I think Spectrier would be in format. And Poltegeist, I played it the first 3 matches I used it in. It had 12 kills. Because literally the second their dark type went down, I set up Shell Smash, and then it was over. And I just see Spectre not even needing to set up the Shell Smash. Like, it just comes in and the game's over. If teams are even moderately chipped, which is why I called for its ban. Maybe that was premature. Maybe I should have let it happen, but I just think it was... This being weak to rocks, forcing it to maybe run boots, being only base 30 speed means that you have ways to respond to it, whereas that one, it didn't feel quite as capable unless you have specifically a dark type to beat it. And if you all you need to do is draft like Lele with Spectrier and the game is over. That was...
I mean, the only thing for me with this one is, okay, so the checks to it are going to be rock, steel, and fire types. Close combat takes out rock and steel type, and it does have access to high horsepower and stomping tantrum, so fire types can't switch in either. So
yeah, and I mean, it's not necessarily a resist, but I do think that like strong fighting types can help break through this, and just the fact that it's base 30 speed it does allow for the other person to, yeah, it might 1-for-1. We've seen Kieran Black do that in format without being ban worthy, so we'll see. But we'll keep an eye on this. This is another one we're watching. Basically, we're just watching Jetman's team to see how all these mons perform, and see if they are needing to be re-tiered later on.
Pretty much.
Next up is the Roserade pick here by Aaron. Roserade, really solid T-Spike setter and hazard remover, or T-Spike soaker, I guess I should say specifically. Spikes as well. It's got multiple status options. It's got Dazzling Gleam for coverage. Has a fantastic Life Orb set, Black Sludge, especially defensive set. I like Roserade a lot. Sludge Bomb poisons are flying around everywhere, so really solid all-around mon. I've drafted this thing and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like it sheerly for the fact that it's able to put up spikes and T-spikes, because this team, it's looking like it's going to be winning off the back of Dracovish, and this is really nice to break those sashes or those really bulky water types that try to sit in on Dracovish.
Yeah, and as the chat is mentioning, and I think correctly so, this team does not appreciate a freeze dry from a strong ice type right now. Glastrier can kind of just spam attacks on this team, so we'll see how this goes. Hopefully he patches that up with his last few picks here. Next up, we have Garbodor coming in hot here. So another...
I didn't know I was in the draft.
Another T-Spikes and Spikes setter and T-Spikes soaker grounded poison. Teams starting to pick those up at this time in the draft. This team starting to look like it has to worry about ground moves, but on some level, ground moves being spammed are Celesteela's favorite thing to get a free switch in on, so you can never really safely just spam ground moves. It's gotta be like a conscious decision about, is he going to go Steela or is he going to stay in with the Garbodor or the Heatran? What am I going to do?
Yep.
Mind games
don't
always
sleep
help.
Don't sleep on a weak armor set to keep. I've just not used a couple of times. And Garbodor actually has a pretty decent move pool as well. You know, it gets Seed Bomb and a couple of, I think, Drain Punch and a couple of other.
Yeah, that's Stomping Tantrum as well. I think you're cutting in and out a little bit. I'm not sure. What the issue there is.
I'm gonna try to pop out the chat for the stream and then shut down the stream itself because my mobile hotspot might be starting to run down a little bit. So we'll try that.
Sounds good. I will just move on to the next pick because it is the Rotom Mo here for the Seattle Dragonaires. Another team that had all of its offense picked early and is starting to pick up some of that bulk. Great removal in this particular case for this roster. Really solid Volt Switcher, which this team doesn't have a ton of momentum, though it does now have the Flip Turn Vaporeon and the Rotom Mo. So it's more of a Volt Flip. I guess it's still Volt Turn, right? It's still Volt Turn. It's Flip Turn. So Volt Turn core there. And I like Rotom Mo. I think it is a really good typing for this team and has a really good niche on this roster to come in on ground moves, come in on like water moves, and Vaporeon also to take those away from things like the Mamoswine. So really solid Mon.
Yeah, definitely a good addition, giving him another defogger so Salamence doesn't have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to move on to this next pick, and it is Como-O, and I am instantly afraid. This is the bane of my draft league career. I drafted it last season in this league. It is a tier 2 Mon in this league. I know it doesn't get its Omni Boost. I still think that's under-tiered, and it won me so many games last season. I ended up getting the bye into the playoffs basically on the back of Como-O. And Mew, which we banned this season as a result of that. But this thing is absolutely nutty. Such a good dragon type. I can't believe it lasted till round 6. It is so good.
See, I've never used it, so I have no way of calling how good or bad this Mon is. I will say that even with Electivire, Zeraora would like to come visit this team because knockoff Play Rough, Plasma Fist, and, close combat or something to hit Electivire is going to rip this team apart.
Yeah, I mean, I like Como-O. I don't think it has any specific place on a rain team or not. Like, it doesn't care, but just a good Mon all around. There's no denying that. Good physical, good special attacker. Can be run pretty bulky, gets Stealth Rocks, has setup on both sides, gets Scale Shot. Like, it is just insane.
Yep.
Next up is Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl coming in here as the Fairy type and the Dark type for this roster. And again, I think this is an interesting thing to look at because Grimmsnarl's a mon you could look at taking to your round 4, and that would be totally normal. I feel like this team has drafted only mons that are in round 1, round 4, or round 9. Every mon on this team could have been taken in one of those 3 rounds, and I wouldn't have been surprised. But here we are in round 6, and he got a really good value out of this because it could have been taken a couple rounds earlier, but instead gets it now. Great screens setter to really facilitate Landorus and Azelf going nuts. Great taunter. Prankster is super fun. It has Spirit Break to stop special attackers from doing anything. So just a good mon all around. Sub bulk up is super frustrating to deal with for opponents. And yeah, I don't see there's nothing bad to say about Grimmsnarl. It's proven that it is a solid draft format mon.
Yep, it also has T-Wave there as well for slowing things down. So
yeah, absolutely. Next up is me, and I am finally drafting my Steel type here. It is Durant. Again, I was looking at Registeel. I was looking at a Tier 4 Steel, and this is where I noticed that Registeel got taken and needed to find some replacement for it. Opted for Durant, like I said, aiming to be the fastest team under the sun. And I don't know. It's a Steel type that has only one weakness, which my team handles fairly well right now with Swampert and Nihilego. This thing can come in on the attacks. It's a Steel type not weak to ground, which I thought was really appreciated because even with grassy terrain, I didn't want to just stack ground weaknesses unnecessarily. So Durant, I feel like, gives me a lot of options. I will miss every attack this season with Hustle, but it's fine. We're just going to roll with it.
Just run Home Claws.
Yeah, and it gets back access to Home Claws now, which is super great. Was I not allowed to use Hone Claws? Oh, yeah, the last time I drafted Durant, it was actually my D-Max Mon in an old, or just at the start Gen 8 League, and you had to D-Max first turn, so I couldn't run Hone Claws on it. But D-Max got rid of the hustle negation. Like, it still gives you the boost from hustle, but it gets rid of the move accuracy check, so that was nice. But hopefully I don't just miss all my important moves. This thing has first impression. It got back its access to Aerial Ace and some of the moves that it lost in the generational shift with Pokemon Home, which is nice. So just really solid. Last time I drafted this, Home wasn't out yet, so going to be fun to have access to.
I just recently picked this up as a free agent in another league, and, you know, I'm fully enjoying it. If you can get a Hone Claws off because of its speed tier, as long as they don't have a faster fire type, you get a Hone Claws off, and then you just Rock Slide and take out their fire type, and it puts in so much work against opponents.
Yeah, and I believe it has Stomping Tantrum, so it's not its ground move isn't affected by grassy terrain. Grassy terrain recovery helps it. I can just run Akaberry. I mean, I like Durant a lot. But here is round 4. We see the split here between players who picked up bulk early and are now grabbing offense, and players who picked up offense early and are now grabbing bulk here as the second half of the draft starts. Favorite pick from round 6?
Haxorus. I mean, that just made that team so much harder to deal with.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Komao only because I've lost to my record against Komao in Draft League format, I believe, is like 1-11. So picking that up round 6 is super solid. All right, so we're going to move on to round 7 now. Round 7, I am going to pick up Talonflame. Again, I'm looking for more speed. I don't think I have enough at this point. And Talonflame, I have never even a little bit been tempted to draft Talonflame before, but I figured let's give it a shot. It's going to be an interesting option. Gale Wings gives me priority dual Wing Beat or Acrobatics or Brave Bird, whatever I'm looking for. And that's super nice. It has Willow, it has Tailwind, it has Swords Dance, it has Roost, it has U-Turn, it has Defog. With Gale Wings, it's Prankster, with Boots especially. So I just, you know what, I was like, you know what? Talonflame seems good. It's a fire type that, again, not weak to ground. Like I said, even though I have grassy terrain, I don't really want to stack up my ground weaknesses. Nihilego doesn't like ground attacks, and I really don't want the rest of my roster to look like food for a ground type to come in and attack. And one thing I was looking at with this team, especially you might start seeing now, is that the common weaknesses are few and far between and are covered as much as possible. So I really don't want someone to spam an attack against me. I want them to have to think about what move they're going for, and if I can react to that appropriately, I can then get the upper hand by switching in the correct mon.
Yeah, I was a Talonflame fan back in Gen 7. I loved it. It took off for me. Gen 8, I haven't had a lot of success with it. One thing to keep in mind with it that I don't think a lot of people want to try or whatever, but its base attack, I believe, is 84, and its base special attack, I believe, is 75. It did pick up Hurricane this generation as well. So you could potentially run a special Talonflame, especially against the Rain team, and potentially, you know, get free Hurricane spam. That's always going to be priority because you don't lose any HP off the Gale Wings.
That's true. I do like me some guaranteed landing Hurricanes because I sure won't land them otherwise.
Yeah, plus if they've got like a very physically defensive steel type that's got, you know, terrible SPDF, which is quite common, you just run, you know, Flamethrower or Fire Blast, and they think they can switch their steel in, take a Flare Blitz, force you to lose your Gale Wings, and instead you drop a Fire Blast and OHKO them.
That's true. Talonflame gonna be fun this season. Next up is the P2 coming in here. Again, another mon that I think now it's like late to take Porygon 2. We're taking some other mons early. So we were waiting for this. We're starting to see it now. It's filling in. I worry this team's offensive presence isn't easy to spot. Azelf and Lando being the only mons knockoff is something this team is definitely afraid of, and Porygon 2 doesn't really help that. But because getting rid of the boots on Rotom, getting rid of whatever Landorus is holding, or at least learning what Landorus is holding, is super nice. Getting rid of the Eevee on Porygon 2. So this team really doesn't appreciate knockoff. But there's nothing bad about Porygon 2 to say, and you know, if he wants to run Trick Room, his team doesn't super set up for it right now, but He could.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The offensive presence on Flames team is very hard to see right now.
But we've got 3 rounds left, so we'll see where it ends up going. Next up is the Drapion pick by the Green Bay Yompers here. So Rain plus Drapion. I mean, you get Toxic Spikes now and a Grounded Poison, so can't really complain too much about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a viable, it can be very good defensively with Black Sludge. It can be a very good Assault Vest user. Swords Dance sets make it a very powerful wall breaker as well.
And it has Sucker Punch, so...
Yep, does get Sucker Punch for priority.
Uh,
I don't know. I want to see how the last 3 picks of this team come together, because
yeah.
it just seems a bit disjointed.
We're getting there. We'll see how it all pans out in like an hour. Next up is the Sand Slash. Alolan Sand Slash here coming in. This team doesn't have a Hail Setter yet. Ninetales has already been taken, but perhaps we'll see the Ice Cream or something come up later on. But Alolan Sand Slash gives another form of removal, gives really solid stabs, gives that Steel type he was not... or I guess he had Registeel before, so he had an Ice type, he had a Steel type. You know, the more I look at it, the more I wonder exactly what this was for, other than maybe Rapid Spin.
Yeah, and that's why when Absolute drafted this, literally 2 minutes after we had been talking about me needing a Steel type before I had Kartana, I almost screamed at him through my computer because I was going to take this thing for an Ice and Steel type, which my team didn't have, for Rapid Spin, for removal, which my team is lacking, for Spikes and Stealth Rocks, which my team desperately needed as well. This was the golden mon for this team, and Absolute's like, nah, I'm going to just take a sniper rifle and hit you in the back with it.
I apologize for a slight delay. I've been called out by the chat, and I'm proving my... I'm either proving or going to look like a fool here. But I'm fairly certain it gets Sucker Punch.
I was pretty sure it did too.
Because I feel like I've seen the animation play, and I've used this thing.
Yeah, I've used Drapion before, and I thought it had Sucker Punch.
But I'm looking it up now.
Absolute. I literally told you I needed Hazard Removal, a Steel type, and all the Steel types. Aggron came off the board, and then you go and take Alolan Sand Slash. I don't want to hear it. I needed that thing.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Alright, well, we were both wrong.
How are we both wrong about that? I swear I've seen that animation play.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how we were both wrong about that, but... Alright, moving on to the next pick. Thank you, chat, for correcting me. Buzz Swole. The Swollest Buzz. This thing's a threat.
You got close combat. That's enough said. They just made it so much harder to deal with.
Yeah, and it was already just an absolute nightmare with Leech Life and Superpower, but now even better. It's just so good. Little slow, and this team, again, probably looking for speed, but we shall see exactly how he wants to play this Buzzwole. I like this pick, though, for this team.
Yeah, it gives him a very powerful Ice and Rock Breaker as well. That, I mean, he already had with Celesteela and Heatran, but... Yeah, it's a strong mon that you're going to have to play around to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have the Darmanitan coming in here. Darm is just a solid mon. I think it's just been a good mon in format for a long time now, and I have nothing negative to say about it. Everyone always talks about its speed tier letting it down. I think actually in Gen 8, it's less worrisome than it has been in the past. Base 95s are starting to become a really solid speed tier to have on your team. And just such a strong breaker. I mean, Sheer Force, Flare Blitz, Life Orb does so much damage.
I mean, Bandit sets are pretty viable too. And he doesn't have to really run the Scarf set because he's got Slurpuff there that says, hello, I'll set my webs for you now.
Yeah.
So.
And with any sort of like hazard stacking from the Roserade, this thing gets even more threatening.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Serena coming in here, a rapid spinning grass type with the U-turn and decent coverage as well. Something this team I think desperately needed was a ground resist. Still nothing off the ground, so still no immunities. EQ spam is still very free, but at least something resistant.
Takes it pretty well too.
That's true, but having one ground resist, you know, at that time it was like Edgequake was good, and now he still doesn't have that a true Edgequake answer. But at least Serena can take a hit in a pinch.
Yep, and it's anti-priority too to, you know, stop things that might potentially try to spam against. Like Ice Shard and that, it'd shut that down right away. First Impression won't go through. Sucker Punch can't come at it, so that is a nice part too.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have Alolan Marowak coming in here. Again, this team just keeps on adding some really fun mons to it. I still really like this roster. And I think Alolan Marowak gives the fire type, gives the ghost type, gives strong physical offense to add to the Excadrill and Zarude side of things. I like this pick here.
Yeah, I have to say that this is probably my favorite team right now. Just from top to bottom, there's not a lot of weaknesses. The one thing that kind of is lacking right now is hazard setters. Does a Lolowak get stealth rocks? I can't remember.
Yeah, it does.
It does. So he's got 2 rockers right now, but that's about it.
Yeah, so we'll see if he can fill out his hazard setting options here, and maybe even pick up one more piece of removal, although with Latios, Excadrill, and Golbat, I think he's okay anyway.
Yeah.
All right, next up is the Mudsdale. Speaking of hazard setters, this team is now chock full of them. The last few picks, Jirachi, Miltank, Ribombee, and Mudsdale, all getting some form of hazards. This team actually a little bit maybe needs more hazard control. I don't actually remember if Zapdos gets Defog, but Rotom and Ribombee do. But with Wish from Jirachi, Mudsdale becomes even that much better. This is the antithesis of the don't use special attacks team. This is a don't use physical attacks team with Intimidate, Incineroar, Miltank, and Mudsdale all saying hello.
Yeah, Mudsdale is such a hard mon to break unless you've got a good, solid special attacking, you know, water or electric type. So, or water or grass type.
I was like an electric type.
I started thinking about how this is the perfect mon to shut down Regieleki as well, and so that's why I said electric type instead of grass type.
That's true. Next up, speaking of the team that says don't use a special attack, finally picking up a mon that can take a physical hit thanks to Intimidate in the Hitmontop. I don't know if this patches all of the problems this team had that I was looking at before. It doesn't have super useful resistances for this team. It is worth noting that since we are talking about the post-draft transactions a little bit, Sylveon and Togekiss were switched. So he does have the Togekiss instead, which Hitmontop coming in on like a rock-type move is a little bit better than coming in on a poison-type move aimed at Sylveon. But it really doesn't answer the problem. It just kind of is like a Band-Aid you're putting over the problem and hoping that it will eventually curb the flow as opposed to actually like treating the wound.
Yeah, I mean, Hitmontop did get a little better because of the Rapid Spin buff, so it's somewhat slowish speed tier. Does, after a Rapid Spin, give itself a little bit more offensive viability because now you're faster hitting off some of those other hits.
And it does have both Mach Punch and Bullet Punch, so it can get a little bit of extra priority in there to take something that's already been chipped and really like finish it off.
Yep.
Next up is Volcanion here. So do you want to talk about this pick?
Yeah, so first off, I don't have Togekiss, so I made that trade to get Sylveon. So right now, Kartana was my only hazard removal. While I don't necessarily want to run hazard removal defog on Volcanion, I certainly can. Volcanion is another mon, under Sticky Webs, appreciates it because of its base 70 speed, definitely appreciates that. Can function very nicely under Trick Room too, so I have dual aspects there. Great move pool, both physical and special. It picked up. It's got Sludge Wave, I know that for a fact. I know it has Earth Power, I believe it has Earthquake. I believe it picked up Flare Blitz. Does give me defog, I said that already. So
Steam Eruption alone is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, Scald with 30 more base power.
So, yeah. I've used Volcanion one other time very early in my career, and it's just been one of those mons that's been sitting there like, come back to me and try it. Plus, it's the only fire-water type in the entire game that I'm aware of.
Yes, it is.
Which makes for a very unique combination, and you can't beat it with other water types because of water absorb. So,
yeah. Next up is the Sableye. Sableye here coming in for... I'm just noticing that this team has, like, all of the mon names are, like, exactly the same length. It's very uniform looking. But Sableye, Prankster-y, Will-O-Wisp, only weak to Fairy. It's been doing the same thing since its inception in Gen 3, and it's been okay at that role forever. Prankster, Recover, Calm Minds, Will-O-Wisps, Toxics, flying around. It's got stab priority on both sides, in the Shadow Sneak and the Sucker Punch, or in both stabs, I should say. So, it does its job. It's supposed to be slow and not care about speed at all, between Prankster and priority. So, it does its job. There's not too much more to say about it.
It's stalling and annoying.
Yeah, and I think this was a early round tier 5 pick, and I think that's a worthwhile tier 5 pick to take early, since that is a usually limited tier, and you kind of want to grab what you're gonna want in order to finish that up.
Yeah.
Next up is Morpeko. What an interesting mon. I was hard on it for a while. I drafted it once, and Aura Wheel is broken. Morpeko is actually kind of nuts. Has Rapid Spin, so it outspeeds everything. Not that matters, because Aura Wheel also boosts speed. It can be electric or dark type. Usually, it's pretty safe to run Protect on this thing to get it to be the type you're looking for without too much of a risk. Leftovers Protect also really nice for it. And base 110 stab attack that boosts your speed and has 2 different possible type combinations. It's actually super viable.
Yeah, and its move pool's not bad either. It gets coverage options like Seed Bomb, so ground types can't necessarily check in on it. Granted, if Aura Wheel's in dark form, they can't necessarily check in anyways, but like a Crook, for example, Seed Bomb's really nice to hit the Crocodile trying to come in on you.
Yeah, and I think it does get U-turn as well, so if you really don't want to deal with it.
That, I don't believe it does. I think it's just Volt Switch.
Was it not? Okay.
Yeah, I think you might be thinking of Togedemaru, which I think gets both Volt turns.
Well, Togedemaru is still the best Tapu, so. Next up is Palossand. Speaking of ground types that can't handle Morpeko here. And I have fluctuated on Palossand. I'm sort of on a... Palossand is a really solid tier 4, really solid round 7 pick. But I wouldn't really do much more than that with it. Good stealth rocker, good stab options, shore up's great, but it doesn't really do much else.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice defensive stealth rocker, but it just, to me, seems to be lacking in the offensive category. Granted, on this team, it's better as a defensive mon. He doesn't really need the offensive power out of it.
Yeah, agreed. Next up, we've got Silvally coming in here for the New Jersey Brobats. And I like this pick here. He doesn't have a fairy, and I always worry about using Silvally as your only fairy on your team. But I like this pick here. It's a good mon.
Yeah.
Gives him removal. Gives him parting shot. So.
Silvally honestly is one of those mons when I go into team prep, it's just like, I'm not even going to prepare for this because you could get an idea, well, my team's weak to ground, and Nidoqueen doesn't have the best match, so maybe they bring Silvally ground, and instead they bring, Silvally fire, and you just prepped wrong. So I honestly tend to just ignore Silvally. I know it's coming. It's just I can never figure out what's coming on it, so it's a very hard mon to have to deal with when you're prepping sometimes.
Yeah, and getting mons that can be helpful in prep is actually an undervalued part of drafting. Maybe someday I'll just draft a team of mons that are like impossible to prep for. Like the Ditto, Silvally,
Mew.
Yeah, it's just mons that like your opponent just like shrugs and throws some mons at a screen and sees what you do. Next up, for the final pick of this round, we've got Steelix.
Why do we go back to defense?
So yeah, we got a couple of nice offensive picks, and we have done a 180 back towards the defense. Finally, this team actually has Rocker that's not Clefable, so that's interesting. But Steelix, I've used it before. I like it. I worry that this team is going to be very hard to break down in the timer.
Yeah, the other thing that this team worries me about is it's so slow. Like, it's going to allow faster teams, your team in particular, to just run attack boosting natures.
That's why I wanted so much speed. I've never really done that.
None for anybody else.
Yeah, so here's the round recap for round 7. And we will just go into our favorite picks here. Do you have one that you got like really stood out to you?
I mean, I'm going to be biased and say my Volcanion because it just fit into my team so well. It finished my Fire, Water, Grass core. It gave me defog, and it functions as a very powerful special wall breaker, which was something that I was, missing.
I think of all the picks here, Buzzwole, Volcanion, and Silvally feel like the ones that were the best value here. As far as like getting a mon that could have been taken earlier, but it managed to wait this long and you benefit from that. I think any three of those could be considered the best pick for this round.
Yeah, Darm's a pretty nice value pick too.
That's true. Darm this late was also really solid. All right, so we're moving on to more bulk in Alolan Persian. So now we've got bulk with momentum.
Yes.
This thing, and I'll hear people say it's got Nasty Plot, it's got Power Gem, Dark Pulse. No, this thing runs knockoff. It runs Play Rough sometimes. It runs Parting Shot. It runs, Fur Coat, and it's just hard to kill with a physical attack. That's what it does. It's not a bad thing. This team is just hard to break. Between Pex and Clefable resisting fighting that you could normally break through Steelix and Persian with, between, Tangrowth and Latias being able to take the ground moves you'd want to aim towards Steelix and Pex, like, this team will be hard to break. And that is clearly by design. I don't disrespect it. It just is bulky.
Yeah, and there's no one mon that can break all this bulk on its own either.
Nope. Next up, we have Carbink here coming in. So picking up that fairy, like I said before, if Silvally is your only fairy, it makes me worry. I don't know if Carbink really cuts it as far as being like a viable fairy week to week, but hey, it's a fairy. So Silvally not the only fairy, so I guess my reservations were unfounded. Carbink has rocks, something this team I think maybe wants to have once in a while, although Skarmory is like the best rocker ever. It's got screens, which is generally what it does, and then it explodes. So we'll see what Carbink does in full, but I haven't seen it do a ton of work match to match in general.
Yeah, I know nothing of Carbink other than the fact that I really liked it the first time I played through X and Y and used it on my Let's Play team. Like, that's literally the amount I know about Carpink, and I thought it evolved into Diane's.
Yeah, it should. I mean, let's be honest. It's probably the second most should evolve Mon into a different Mon that exists in the world after Love
That was breaking the rules of how mythical Pokemon worked, and then they did it a generation later and just said, see, screw you, we're going to do it this way instead.
Next up is Orbeetle, so the newest of the Webbers here. A ground resistance to pair with Bulu. It's got U-turn. It's got good offensive stats. It's so slow, but this team doesn't mind that. I actually think this is an interesting pick. I'm curious to see how it goes. I think of the Webbers, it feels like one of the more niche picks. But I've seen Orbeetle put in work before.
So early in the generation, I used Orbeetle a lot, thinking that it was going to be the next great Weber. I thought it had some, interesting tech, base 90 speed, massive defense stats. I thought it could put in some work, and it didn't do a whole lot for me. It's definitely viable in the right hands, but I just don't think it's all that super great of a web setter. It's there because Slurpuff and Ribombee and Araquanid and Vikavolt are all gone.
Yeah, and also because you already have Zeraora, you're worried about taking Galvantula, although they don't share a weakness, so that is worth noting. Yeah. Next up is some hardcore value in round 8. It is tier 3 Seismitoad in round 8. This is absolutely nutty. Freeze Dry still says hello to this team, but a second water type is actually something this team probably appreciates quite a bit, especially a water type that is resistant to rock as well. Gives him a Stealth Rocker finally on this roster. Gives him some fun utility moves, offensive on the special and physical sides. This thing is such good value for round 8.
Yeah, this thing never should have been sitting here at this point. And Freeze Dry still kind of runs up on this team.
But that's a little bit less common than just any old ice move, it's at least a little more specific.
So
next up, we've got Venusaur. Another Mon that in round 8 feels a little late, though if you're not running specifically a Sun team, it's probably not going to get drafted. So this is the team where they've got Hail with Venusaur. But you gotta think they're looking at a Sun setter at some point.
Yeah, Tails feels like it's not, the primary focus of this team. It feels more like it's here to set screens and then have its weather removed.
Yeah. So telegraphing Sun's coming, so we'll get to that when we get to that, but Venusaur's here now. Next up is Togetic. Would you want to talk about Togetic with your Togekiss on your roster right now?
Yeah, so this is where the changes that got made post-draft are a little wonky. This was actually a screwed-up pick because I put in Aurorus, and the site drafted Abomasnow for me. So I accidentally got Abomasnow, but the big thing, and I said it with the Kiss pick earlier, is that when I have either Kiss or Togetic, I need that second Fairy type because I struggle to find the Fairy type move to put on them. Togetic is literally Togekiss Light. The only thing is it doesn't get Air Slash, so flinch hacks aren't as prevalent, but it's also incredibly hard to die because it is so bulky.
Yeah.
And it has decent recovery too.
Speaking of Aurorus.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is where that trade came in.
Yeah, so this is part of the trade that ended up getting made between the Atlanta Victory Stars and the Chicago Beartics. So this is not on this roster, so we're just going to move on to the next Mon here, but just a heads up, Aurorus gets picked at this point in the draft. Next up is Dragalge. Dragalge is super strong offensively. But, adaptability with Sludge Wave and Dragon Pulse literally just wrecks mons that don't specifically resist. It has Surf or Scald, Thunderbolt. It's got Shadow Ball, I think, too, so really solid offensive options. Assault Vest Dragalge is really good. You could run Pyapa Berry or Shuka Berry if you need specifically to take a certain hit. I like Dragalge a lot here.
Yeah, Dragalge is one of those mons. It's slow, but it's hard to switch into. Choice Spec sets can be very, very lethal. It does have Poison Touch. It does get the ability to absorb T-Spikes for you. It did get Flip Turn, so it does have that ability definitely like on a Choice Spec set where you could Flip Turn out. It got Focus Blast to take out opposing Steel types as well. Gets Hydro Pump, gets Play Rough for some reason on its physical side. It did pick up Scale Shot. So it's a mon that can do a lot of different things if you are not careful. It can just blow a hole through your team when you think you're set defensively.
Next up, we have Wheezing here, original Cantonian Wheezing, to pair with the Golbat. I think this is a little bit of a redundant pick with the Golbat. I think one of them would do the job. I think Wheezing actually does the job better, despite being a lower tier. So potentially worth exchanging Golbat at some point. They do slightly different jobs. Wheezing obviously setting Toxic Spikes, Golbat removing hazards, but both ground immune poison types that are not super slow, but not super fast, and doing damage and being physically bulky.
Yeah, the fact I keep forgetting this thing does not have defog constantly messes me up from time to time. Because the other one gets it, so I think this one gets it too when it doesn't. It does have neutralizing gas though as well, so it doesn't always have to be a Levitate user. It could be a T-Spike remover with neutralizing gas to try and shut down some abilities.
That's very true, and it sets them up on its own, which is super nice. Next up, we have the Flareon pick. Flareon coming in as the fire type now for this team. Again, really, really need something off the ground coming up at some point. We're just waiting for it to find that, because until that point, we're just going to keep saying, "Oh, look, Earthquake." And especially Mamoswine says hello to this team.
Yeah, Mamoswine would like to know this team's location. I think this is, while his team is super ground weak, considering he didn't have a fire type, I think this is incredible value for a low tier fire type. It is another cleric. It does Wish Pass as well. Like you said with Jolteon, it's not necessarily that you need the whole thing, but part of it could work. It somewhat functions as a decent special wall with base 95, and then the fact that it gets access to Guts. So Guts boosted quick attack, obviously Facade. You could flame charge to get a speed boost. It can put in a lot of work on some teams very quickly.
Yeah, I think I've always been a proponent of this. A low tier mon doesn't mean the mon is bad. It just means the number of matchups the mon is good in is lower. Where a high tier mon, you expect them to come to all the matchups and be pretty good. Low tier mons, when they come, they can be way better than the high tier mons. They'll just come to fewer. I think Flareon exemplifies that. It will not be good in every single match week to week, but when it is good, it is the best mon for the job.
Yeah, definitely agree there with you.
All right, next up we have Scrafty. Scrafty is a super fun mon with 3 fantastic abilities and a great stab combination, as we know, with Urshifu. And has Dragon Dance. It has Iron Head for fairies or Poison Jab. And I think this thing, it's a threat. It's a good mon. Great low tier pick here. Late draft pick. Absolutely worthwhile.
Sub bulk up sets. Assault Vest is a very common set. Assault Vest Intimidate, it's like Incineroar. It just makes it hard to kill. I will say, I have taken down an Urshifu Rapid Strike with this thing. So it definitely can be very lethal when used correctly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Next,
single strike, not rapid strike.
I was going to be very impressed, but I was going to roll with it. Next up is Drampa. Drampa has all the coverage you could ever ask for and more. Berserk, as we know, is really good. Actually, even Sap Sipper can be a great random tech on Drampa if you need it. This team clearly doesn't look like it needs a grass immunity, but in a pinch, if you need to, it's an interesting option for that. But Berserk, it's got Calm Mind, it's got Roost. I love the idea of just getting hit by something, triggering Berserk, clicking Roost, and then clicking Draco. They hit you again, they trigger Berserk again, and then you've got a +2 Draco. It brings you back to neutral instead of even going negative. And then you've still got 50% HP Drampa, and you're at neutral after killing something with a Draco Meteor. So, but it's got literally all the coverage and defog.
Yep. I've never used it, so I don't have much to say on it.
One fun fact about Drampa is outside of Mew and Smeargle, Drampa learned individually the most types of Z moves in Generation 7.
Interesting facts.
Yeah. Next up, Vanillux. So we finally see that Hail Setter, like I said, probably going to pick up the Ice Cream Cone, and does. Veil, Hail, giving speed to Sandslash, all good things. Mamoswine, Inhale. I mean, obviously you can't run Snow Cloak in this league. That's not allowed, but I think it's not allowed at least. I hope it's not allowed. But Vanillux, really good for this team, I think. Does give a huge benefit to the Sandslash as well.
Yeah, the only thing that I will say with this team right now is outside of Vaporeon, I believe my Volcanion would really like to have a talk with this team.
I think one thing this team is definitely going to need to rectify too is that outside of Lele, you can just spam fighting moves. So hard. Mence takes it, but it doesn't appreciate it. If Conkeldurr comes in and just goes for a close combat, Mence will take it, but it's not going to like it.
A lot of fighting types also get ice coverage too, though.
Yeah.
So, for example, Urshifu could just Ice Punch.
Yeah. So, definitely something to watch out for in the future, but no fairy yet. We assume that's probably going to come down the road. Speaking of fairies, my least favorite fairy of all, Comfey getting drafted here. So Como-O followed by Comfey is a, what's that pukey face emote? But this team, again, I think it's starting to come together. I think the beginning it was worrying, but some of these later picks feel like picks that could have come earlier in the draft. Aegislash, Como-O, Comfey, Drapion are all individually solid mons, and I think this team is coming together now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you've got against Comfey, but it can do a lot of work when it's allowed to function. Remove the Steel type, let this thing get a couple of Calm Minds up, and it just kind of gets to be really hard to deal with.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, is it's so hard to deal with when it starts setting up, and it's so bulky that it can usually do that without much worry. And Leech Seed just lets it do it. Next up, we've got the Druddigon pick coming up here. Druddigon, I like Druddigon. I didn't think I would. I drafted it once, and I was like, I actually enjoyed this. Glare, Dragon Tail, Stealth Rock, Knockoff, Sucker Punch. I don't actually know if it got Knockoff. Sucker Punch. I made a Druddigon set that was explicitly and specifically designed to beat either a physical or special Swellow regardless. It was a pretty interesting Druddigon set. I forget exactly what the EVs were and everything, but I remember that I had calced it out so that Brave Bird, Recoil, plus Rough Skin, plus Rocky Helmet, guaranteed put it in range of Sucker Punch. It was like I really like this thing can be surprisingly good in niche matchups. It's another one of those low tier mons that like nothing does its job quite as well as it does when the matchup comes for it.
Yeah, and again, I am very concerned about the speed tiers on this team right now.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. Hopefully these last two mons will pick those speed tiers up. My pick next, and I grab a mon that I am starting to be known for in Draft League format, Gardevoir. Great fairy and psychic type, and I apologize to Absolute who yelled at me for thinking that Lele wasn't a fairy, but that's okay. It's mostly a psychic type and a fairy sort of as an extra added benefit, whereas Gardevoir is sort of the opposite. It's mostly a fairy with a psychic type as sort of an extra added benefit. Since, in my opinion, now especially now that Zygarde's back, but before Zygarde came back, I think Gardevoir's Moonblast is the most spammable move in the game, outside of Thousand Arrows. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, I don't have really hardly anything to say about Gardevoir because I've never actually used standard Gardevoir. I've only ever used Mega Gardevoir.
I mean, Gardevoir does everything Mega Gardevoir does, but better, in my opinion, because it doesn't have to get locked into item. So here is the draft as it stands. Not the draft, this round as it stands. I think there's probably going to be agreement here. I don't even know if we need to spend much time on it. Seismitoad is the best pick of this round.
Yeah, it'd be Seismitoad and then probably Flareon right behind it. So.
Yeah, I don't even think it's like Seismitoad and then the rest of them. Like they're all 3 steps behind. That is what a ridiculous pick in round 8.
Yeah, it's a steal.
All right. Next up, the penultimate round, I grab Girder, a mon that I have started using a lot more in Gen 8, just because it is usually the right cost. I actually really wanted in this draft to take a different fighting type, but it was specifically going to take Hitmonlee, but it was tier 3, and I couldn't justify it once I lost, I think it was Slurpuff. I realized that my entire draft needed to be reworked to try to grab Gardevoir out of tier 3 instead. So Girder's here. It's a defogger. It's a strong fighting type. I think it's a better defogger than Conkeldurr, and I'm excited to use it. I've used it before. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't have much to say because I've only ever used Conkeldurr. I know it's basically Conkeldurr Light, so...
Yeah, and 3 tiers lower, which is nice.
Yeah, major budget save there.
Next up, we have a Selgor. A Selgor going to be coming in here. Finally trying to fix that speed tier a little bit you were mentioning that you were worried about.
Yeah, but you didn't have to, full throttle it.
0 to 100. Well, 143 real fast. Is 143? Is it faster?
I think it's 145.
5?
It's either 143 or 145. I think it tops out at 427, so...
So it's 45, yeah. Because
145.
Aurora's 423, so...
And Dragapult's 422, I think.
Something like that. Anyway, yeah, he went 0 to a billion real fast here. Fastest hazard setter under the sun, fastest final gambit under the sun. I don't know if it 100% fixes the speed tiers, but certainly gives him a top end of that speed tier.
Unburdened Throat Spray is a very, very dangerous...
Hey, there's a Regieleki, a mon that can beat Regieleki if it's not plus speed nature.
If it gets the Unburden off, it's going to be faster than it.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, we have Tier 5 Beartic coming in here. I
respect it. I respect him putting a Beartic on a rain team.
Yeah, no, I mean, it gets Swift Swim. It gets Slush Rush. I'm running a Beartic in the Crown Tundra tournament that's taking place next weekend. It's like an online competition that Nintendo's running on the Switch. If anyone wants to do it, signups I think are still open. Just go into your battle comps. And I am using an assault vested D-Max Beartic because you just spam Max Hailstorm, set up your own hail, and then you outspeed Dragapult, and it's great. So I don't know. I love it. I'm into it right now. So I'm high on Beartic recently.
I did my very first Draft League. That wasn't a randomized league, because that was how I got into Draft League, was playing in a randomized league. I put Beartic on a sleet team. I had a rain setter and a hail setter, and it was just funny as all hell. But I have to respect it. What do we have for the well-played Beartics?
Yeah, your mascot there getting drafted.
Yep.
So next up, we've got Salazzle. I love Salazzle in Gen 8. I think this is incredible value in round 9.
Yeah, this is this round Seismitoad.
Yeah, the round 9 Seismitoad here. Really, really helps this team just a lot. Type-wise, what it can do supportively. And hey, don't sleep on like a Dragon Dance set with Fire Lash, because +1 attack, -1 defense. All of a sudden, this thing feels like it's coming off of a Swords Dance, and it's got +1 speed. So.
Yeah, and nothing is safe from the sub-toxic protect flamethrower set.
Yeah, no, I respect this pick a lot. I like Salazzle a lot this gen. So now, speaking of discount mons, we've got Clefairy coming in here. I don't have a ton to say about Clefairy. It's like baby Clefable, and unlike most of the discount, like take a lower one, it actually feels like it's just, this one doesn't just feel discount, it feels like, you know, like the knockoff store brand instead of the actual, like, you know, nice private company brand of the option. It just doesn't do the same things, or every time you're like, oh, maybe it'll be as good. It's not, but it does what you expect it to. You know, it's not going to make you, you're not expecting a Clefable when you draft Clefairy, so.
I mean, I'll disagree with you a little bit on this, because I've actually used Clefairy a few times, and it is actually pretty comparable to Clefable. The only thing is you lose one of the, you know, premier abilities, but it can still do the same things. It's got the same move pool. It can be bulkier with Eviolite.
I mean, I agree that it can be bulkier. I just think, like, Clefable offers you just a little bit more from a game-to-game performance, but that's what you'd expect. Since Clefable is tier 1 and Clefairy is tier 5, so.
Yeah.
Next up is Beheum. I'm actually not sure if I said that correctly. I rarely say the name of this mon out loud. This is a mon I have not seen get drafted in Draft League very frequently, but the times I have seen it, it seems to do fine. Analytic is a great ability, and Psychic is a good typing, and it does, you know, it doesn't wow anybody, it doesn't blow anyone out of the water, but for a tier 5 mon, you can do worse.
Yeah, I don't really have any comment on it, because this is the first time I've ever seen it drafted.
Yeah, it's not the most common of mons. Speaking of low tier mons that shouldn't be there, Noctowl, I am a fan of. I have yet to draft Noctowl in Gen 8 and not make finals. So this thing is way better than I think anybody gives it credit for. Picking up Nasty Plot with Tinted Lens, Hyper Voice, is insane. After a plot, if you give it a Silk Scarf, it can 2-hit KO Tyranitar in Sand with Hyper Voice. Or with Hurricane, excuse me. Either one. But yeah, it's crazy how much damage this thing can do.
Interesting to know, because I've had Noctowl before and it did nothing for me.
Well, in Gen 7, it would definitely have done nothing.
I have it in Gen 8.
Oh, well, then you were using it wrong.
Clearly.
Because it needs one move. It just spams Hurricane with Tinted Lens. And it goes straight through teams. Yeah, if you want to see Noctowl do work, there's multiple videos on my channel and the TTM channel of Noctowl just putting in absolute ridiculous amounts of work for a tier 5 mon. And it gets defog, it gets roost, it's surprisingly bulky. It does what it needs to do. Screens, Hypnosis, if you really want to run it, it's got Heat Wave, Shadow Ball, Psychic. You know, it's got other options if you really don't want to run the Tinted Lens Hurricane set, but why wouldn't you? Don't show them the mocks. I had Noctowl in a couple of mocks for one of my battles. I forget which one. I think it was the PCL, and it went ham in those mocks. Was 6-0ing people from turn 1. All right. Next up is the Regigigas pick here. Regigigas, a Mon.
Sub protect. That's what you do now. You sub protect until your slow start ends, and then you just go nuts.
I mean, yeah, but it's still not. I don't know. I'll wait to pass judgment, but I worry about this pick.
Yeah.
All right, next up is a Mon I really like here that I always forget has equal special attack and physical attack, and it is Frostlass. It picked up Triple Axle, it picked up Poltergeist, and its physical set is probably more dangerous than its special set now. Really solid speed tier.
Very problematic Mon to deal with.
Yeah, great typing offensively, really good speed tier. Destiny Bond, Trick. You know, it's got some fun little things it can do. Spikes. Really good Mon.
Yeah, and this team, I believe, has all 4 hazards now.
Does Dragalge get T-Spikes? Does Frostlass get T-Spikes?
Dragalge gets T-Spikes.
It does?
Yeah,
I totally didn't know that.
Spikes, and webs. The only thing he's missing is Steel Spikes, but only one Mon can set those.
And we don't have G-Max legal, so...
Yep.
Next up is the Haunter pick here. So Ghost type starting to go. And I have never used Haunter. I have used Gengar, and I've liked it. But I've never actually used Haunter. Did it also pick up Nasty Plot?
Yeah, Gengar has it, so I would assume that Haunter gets it as well.
So it can run Eviolite, it can run Scarf, it can run a bunch of different sets. Pretty solid Mon all over the place. And it still has Levitate, unlike Gengar.
Yeah, and no, to answer anyone's question, he cannot trade that with Gold Girder, so they get Tier 5 Conkeldurr and Gengar. That's not how that works.
I wish, though. That was clever, whoever said that. Was that you who said that in the chat?
It was. Yeah, I think it was... I don't remember. I think it might have been this coach that said it.
All right. Next up is the Noivern. Noivern, another solid pick here for value here in round 9.
You can call it solid or whatever. I had to settle on a dragon type because I dropped Gudra and to get Kartana. I personally hate this thing with a passion. It is like you and Komao. I am 1-11 versus this thing, and I have won 0 games using this thing. So I'm not particularly thrilled that it's here, but it's the only choice I had in Dragons at this point, and I desperately needed some speed.
Well, it fills all those roles.
And it's another defogger. None of my defoggers want to run defog, though.
Next up, speaking of things that don't want to run removal, we've got Armaldo here now, which is a spinner and actually does a decent job of that. It's also a rock setter. But another Swift Swim Mon. So this guy is the team with Hail, Swift Swim, Chlorophyll. That's fun. It's not what you're usually expecting. But yeah, I like Armaldo. I think Boots really, really helped Armaldo become relevant.
Yeah, this was actually a late round or late draft snipe on me because I needed to draft this for the trade conditions, and I could have let Noivern go around and didn't. We still worked it out, but yeah, Armaldo is definitely a fantastic, low tier rock setter and hazard control.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Sableye, I don't know if it gets Rain Dance and Sunny Day, but that could be, Prankster Manual.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this thing gets Rain Dance itself, so if it wants to set it up on its own, it can do that. Next up is Audino coming in here. So, This team keeping up the trend in which every single Pokemon in its teams has an O in its name.
Nice.
And yeah, I don't know what more there is to say. It's a bulky mon that can take the hits we were talking about before, so that's good to know.
We see another fossil here, Caracosta.
Yeah, would you like to talk about it? Do you have anything you want to say? 'Cause I've never drafted it, so.
I have drafted it once on a rain team because it gets Swift Swim, but that's really it. Sturdy Stealth Rocks, so as long as either you have boots or something, you're guaranteed to get your rocks up.
It has Shell Smash.
Yeah, it can smash up. I don't know how well it fits this team, though. I mean, it's not the bulkiest of water types, and this team would really like a bulky water type.
That's true. It is really not the bulkiest of water types, but Sturdy can help it take that one hit it needs to take if needed.
Yeah.
Next up is Tauros, the king of Gen 1, but since then, merely just a cow. Tauros is really strong offensively, but with no defensive presence at all. And solid speed, in all honesty. Pretty good coverage, but, and Intimidate's pretty good ability, or if you really want to run Anger Point to beat that Wicked Blow that you're going to throw at it, it exists, so.
Yeah, Sheer Force Life Orb's not bad, and, it's not a terrible move pool. It is the Gen 1 Mon that got everything. Like I said earlier, with Gen 1 Mons, they got everything under the sun, it seems like.
Yeah. All right, are you ready for this next pick? It is Hippopotas. It's coming. I did not see the sand on this team, but here we are. So now we've got sand. I don't know what else to say about it. Stealth Rocks and sand.
Yeah, and he's got no sand abuser either, so it's just more bulk.
Well, he's got one pick left, so we'll see. But before that, let's get into the round recap, and we are definitely seeing it is the end of the draft when 4 of the Mons are not even fully evolved here. But I think, like we both said, the pick of this round goes to Salazzle.
Yeah.
Nothing else really comes close to that in terms of the value at this time in the draft. Noctowl, I gotta give a shout out to it one more time, but it's my boy. But it's I don't think it's the best pick this round. I think that's Salazzle. All right, the final round begins here with I almost said Samurott. Stoutland.
There's our sand sweeper.
There's our sand sweeper. So we got the Hippopotas, we got the Stoutland, and thankfully, I'd like to say it's a little bit more offense, but of course it can run the Intimidate set if he doesn't want to run sand, so can be bulky.
Yeah, Stoutland's not. It's a nice addition to sand teams. When you're looking down low in tier 5, it's a nice, sand thing, but as your primary sand sweeper, I'm not really sure what it's.
It feels like sand is more an afterthought for this team than like a primary part of the team.
Yeah, it honestly feels like sand is here just to be even more, it's going to make Steelix harder to kill. It's going to make Stall even worse because now you've got sand and toxic and leech seed and all sorts of damage racking up on you.
Yep. Next up, we've got Lurantis here. So the contrary Mon is here. And Lurantis is going to be joining this team. Again, I didn't have a ground type, so not a ground type, a grass type, so not a bad option for a low tier grass type. Does its job. Clicks Superpower, gets stronger. Clicks Leaf Storm, gets stronger.
It does get defog.
Yep.
I've used Lurantis quite a few times, so I'm pretty familiar with it. I love running Assault Vest Lurantis, to be perfectly honest. Like Assault Vest Brave Nature, Leaf Storm in order to boost your special attack up to where you can sweep with Leaf Storm, and then you just fire off superpower, generally carry knockoff for clearing items, and then that fourth move is coverage. It can get scarily out of hand if you're not careful. And it's a nice anti-web as well, because you don't want to give this thing a speed boost too.
All right, so the next Mon is going to be Rotom Frost here, finalizing this draft here. Nice off-the-ground option, which is exactly what the doctor ordered. This was a bit of a snipe from me. I was actually still looking at an electric type as well. Little surprising to see the team with Zeraora opting to take a second electric type here. But like I've mentioned before, don't share a weakness, so not the end of the world. But definitely a snipe from me. So I like the speed tier. I like the move set. And with all the weather flying around, there's a non-zero chance Blizzard ends up being both a better option and a liability at times, depending on the matchup he's in.
Yeah, and I will say that of all the Rotom forms, this is probably the most, outside of Rotom Mo, this is probably the most offensive of them. So, at least in my mind, you generally see Rotom Heat be run more of a defensive set. You generally see Rotom Wash run on the defensive side. So it is a nice contrast for his team to have, the offensive Rotom.
Yeah, I agree. Next up is Ditto, finalizing this team again, finishing the team where there's an O in every name. Just to make sure he has that. I don't know why, but that like stood out to me as I'm reading this slide. Just the O, I think the O's just line up on the page really well. Just in my the way my eye is seeing it. But Ditto is the single mana I've drafted the most in draft format. It is the best, in my opinion, the best 7th Mon every week of the draft, every week of play. Whether or not you bring it, your opponent has no choice but to account for it and prep for it, and that is absolutely massive. It's doing work even before you start the battle, and if you don't bring it, a lot of your opponent's sets are built suboptimally to try to avoid risking Ditto killing them with their own stuff. So,
I mean, I can attest to that. I've gone up against Dittos with Haxoruses, and it's like, do I set up with Haxorus, or do I just run a Banded set? And if I do set up, do I carry Dragon Claw, because I don't want this thing to sweep me with my own move?
Yeah, so then you run a suboptimal set, and then they don't even bring Ditto, and now you don't have Dragon Claw. It's just so good in that role. I think Ditto usually comes to about 30 to 50% of the matches in a season if you're using it optimally, but that doesn't mean the other 70 to 50% of the matches it's not doing work.
Hey,
Next,
there's Sun.
And finally, we have the Sun showing up. So the team that has Chlorophyll, Swift Swim, and a Hail Setter finally gets Sun. This team is all over the place right now, but honestly, Sun boosted Victini, Venusaur looks amazing, and he can turn off the sun, so to speak, with the Ninetales in order to get the most out of Tapu Fini. So I like this team. I think it's interesting. I wouldn't personally draft double weather. I'm just not a weather player, but I like this team.
That was a shot right to my heart there, Gold. Anyways, it does give Jolteon hidden power fire essentially too. So.
Yeah, it's true, depending on what he needs. All right, so it's you're up next. Your final pick in this draft was the Tangela, a mon I've recently gotten.
Yeah, this was the mon that was a part of that trade deal in order to get Auroras that I needed. So I literally just drafted it for that reason. Was to trade it. I have no idea what it does other than being discount Tangrowth.
It's bulkier than Tangrowth. I mean, mostly it's like Leech Seed knockoff shenanigans and just generally annoying. But I've actually recently been impressed with Tangela. It is a complete counter to Tapu Koko. Fun fact. Hard counters it. Yeah, Brave Bird, if you run max defense, does 30%.
I'm gonna need this mon back when I play that. Can I just trade for it and then trade it back to you?
Next up, we've got the Magnezone. So saving that high tier pick for the very end of the draft. Finally getting his electric type as well. And we again have seen how good electric types look in this particular meta, in this subset of teams that have been drafted. Magnezone, arguably just one of the best ones for what it can do, locking in other steel types. Losing Hidden Power Fire, definitely unfortunate for it, but like literally just says, hello, Celesteela, and then it dies, which is awesome. I mean, you could probably run a Shuka Berry to take the EQ that's coming your way from the Celesteela, but I like Magnezone here. I like this pick.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned this using Magneton. It does not actually care too much about the Hidden Power Fire being gone, because Specs Steel Beam is still going to, you know, OHKO quite a few things.
All right, next up we have the Lilligant. Lilligant coming in here as the Quiver Dancer, Sleep Powderer, Teeter Dancer, whatever. It's a low-tier grass type, does its job very, very well.
Yeah, I got nothing to say on it.
That's about all Lilligant does. The final pick here for the Vancouver Kyogres is going to be Machoke, picking up a fighting type, which is something he was missing before. A decent Eviolite Mon, and good coverage moves. I mean, there's not much more to say about Machoke either.
Yeah, we are literally at the bottom of the barrel here, where people are scraping through tier 5 trying to find things.
Oh yeah, Dracloak comes up next. Speaking of which, that I don't know what even to say about Dracloak. It's a ghost and a dragon type.
I've used it one time. It is nowhere near as powerful as Dragapult. You literally just throw a Choice Scarf on it and try to do as much damage as you can before you die.
Next up is Wishy Washy coming in here. A decent tier 5 option, but after 25%, or once it's below 25%, it's a very bad tier 5 option. So
yeah, but until it gets to that 25%, if you don't have something that can switch in, it can be very problematic for you.
And access to U-turn means that even if you do have something you can switch in, it can usually do its job multiple times.
Yeah, or if you get Trick Room up, which this team actually looks like it could function very well under Trick Room, with Raikou being the only thing above base 100.
This is only Setter Beheeyem?
Yes. That is the unfortunate thing right now.
A little bit of a liability, but possible option for certain matchups. Next up, we have Rotom. Rotom Spoop coming in here. So, honestly, of all the low-tier Mons, this one's not a bad one. Really solid Mon. I've used it to great success. Really like it. Good defogger. Good stabs and status options. Next up, we've got Dusclops. Dusclops is going to be... It's funny that it's the same tier as Dusknoir and still better than it. I'm not sure Dusclops makes this team or breaks this team. It just is another Mon on this team.
It did get Poltergeist, which is nice. So
yeah, and it's so bulky, which is helpful for the Vaporeon and Registeel Dusclops, like little mini core.
Yeah,
excuse me.
It's bulky.
All right, next up we've got Claydol. Claydol coming in here as the epitome of almost there, I think. It's got all the tools to be successful and just is mediocre.
Yeah, and this was a snipe because I was looking at grabbing this post-draft for some hazard control. You know, Levitate, Rapid Spin boosting speed, plus Nasty Plot. Maybe you get it set up. It is a Stealth Rocker, but alas, it went right here.
Such is the life. And the final pick of the draft, I grabbed Emolga. I have never even considered this thing in my life, but once Rotom Frost went, I really wanted an electric type off the ground, and it was the other tier 5 that did that. So
you could have gotten Rotom Fan.
It was tier 4.
Was it? Why the Rotom Fan tier 4?
I don't know, but it was not in tier 5. So I needed a tier 5. I had no choice. Emolga was the Mon. You know, maybe down the road I will try to swap out like Girder for Rotom Fan and then Emolga for like some tier 5 fighting, but there weren't a whole lot of options here. So it's another Mon over base 100. We're going for the fastest team under the sun, like I said. And I've never even looked at its move pool before this, so we'll see how this season goes. But there we go. So to wrap up, we've got the final round of picks here. Would you like to give us your favorite pick from round 10?
I mean, value-wise, apparently we had your pick twice, and we didn't see Trevenant for.
Oh yeah, we had so instead of Trevenant, our apologies. The Minnesota Lycanrocs should have had Trevenant listed as their last Mon, but it did not pop up that way.
As far as this round, I'm going to say it's either Magnezone or Torkoal. Magnezone, just great value to get at the end of the draft, and Torkoal finally gets the weather setter for the team.
Yeah, I think Torkoal does a lot there. I like Ditto as a pick here. But I mean, I think obviously like power level Magnezone's strong, but that was sort of a calculated, nobody else has the points to take a tier 2, so let me just hold off on that.
Smart play.
Yeah, definitely a worthwhile a good place to be at the end of a draft, especially. But yeah, so that is the draft stream for the main league of the PBAL Season 6. There are 16 coaches, as we mentioned, at the top of this stream, and they are all listed in the little corners of the box of their last pick. A reminder that throughout the next week, we will start seeing the draft analyses of all 16 of these teams dropping on their own personal YouTube channels. I will probably, for instance, record mine like next week and upload it. But this is the week we will also start hearing about these battles happening. Coaches are going to start doing their battles. Uploads start next week, I believe. Not this coming weekend, the weekend after is when uploads will start for week 1. So we'll see how this season breaks down. We've got these 16 super cool teams. Reminder, they're only 10 Mons each. And each coach will, again, be posting their own draft analysis. I think that'll do it for us, though. And, yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and we will see you guys later.
Agree to that. See you guys next time.